Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1, I bought the place for cheap, too cheap. The real estate agent called it quirky with lots of charm. I called it rotten, but I needed a roof. On the first night, I noticed the attic door. It had thick nails driven into it, not from outside, but from inside the attic. Deep gouges covered the frame like something had tried to force its way out. I didn't open it, not then. I should have left it alone. But the noise started, not rats, not creaking. A voice, slow, whispered. Always the same sentence. I finally pulled the nails. What I found behind that door didn't look alive, but it knew my name. The previous owner had died suddenly. Heart attack, they said. Clean paperwork, no complications. But neighbors talked differently when they thought I wasn't listening. They mentioned the daughter who used to live here. Young woman, maybe 25. Haven't seen her since her father passed. Strange how people just disappear, they'd mutter, then change the subject when I asked questions. I started keeping a journal, writing down the whispers, the timing, the tone. The voice was female, soft but urgent. She kept repeating the same phrase, he said I was sick, over and over, sometimes louder, sometimes barely audible, always from behind that sealed door. The smell hit me on my third week, sweet and stale, like flowers left too long in water. It seemed to seep through the ceiling, stronger near the attic access. I convinced myself it was old insulation, maybe a dead animal. Houses this old always smell wrong. I found the first letter wedged behind the kitchen cabinet while fixing a leak. Handwriting shaky, desperate. Nobody believes me. The medicine makes me sleepy, but I'm not sick. I hear him talking on the phone about selling the house. Where will I go? More letters surfaced as I renovated, hidden in walls, taped under drawers, folded inside light fixtures, all in the same handwriting, all unsigned. The tone grew increasingly frantic. References to treatments and episodes and being monitored. References to a father who spoke to doctors behind closed doors. The whispers grew stronger, more distinct. I could make out full sentences now. He said I was sick. He locked me up here. Nobody came looking. I called the local authorities, asked about missing person reports from the area. They found one filed 6 months after the previous owner's death. A concerned employer wondering about a young woman who'd stopped showing up for work. Case went cold quickly. Family claimed she'd moved away for treatment. No forwarding address. The medical records took weeks to obtain. Patient confidentiality laws, they said, but persistence pays off. The documents painted a picture of prolonged psychiatric treatment, multiple hospitalizations, medications for conditions that seemed to shift with each visit, always the same doctor signing off, always the father providing consent. I interviewed the doctor. He retired shortly after his patient's father died, moved across the country. Said he remembered the case vaguely, troubled young woman, difficult family situation. Claimed she'd been transferred to a facility somewhere else. No, he couldn't recall which one. Patient confidentiality, you understand. The pharmacy records told a different story. Medications prescribed but never picked up. Prescriptions written for weeks after the last documented visit. Refills ordered by phone, voice matches confirmed by the father. The pharmacist remembered him, always agitated, always in a hurry. Said his daughter was too sick to come in person. I pulled up those floorboards where the smell was strongest. Found them, personal items, clothes, a wallet with identification. Everything someone would need if they were planning to leave. Everything left behind by someone who never got the chance. The basement revealed more. A room I'd assumed was storage had a reinforced door. New locks recently installed, scratches on the walls, food containers, empty pill bottles, a mattress on the floor. The room had no windows. I confronted the neighbors again. This time I brought photographs, items I'd found. Suddenly their memories sharpened. Yes, they'd heard arguments, shouting from upstairs. They'd assumed it was the television. The father always said his daughter was having episodes, said she wasn't well enough for visitors. The coroner's report on the father listed natural causes, heart attack during sleep, but toxicology showed elevated levels of medications, the same ones prescribed for his daughter, medications that hadn't been picked up from the pharmacy in months. I found the key in his bedroom, hidden inside a book about caring for adult children with mental illness. The key opened the basement room. Inside, more letters, these ones different, addressed to authorities, to doctors, to anyone who might listen, all explaining that she wasn't sick, that the medications made her confused, that she needed help. None of the letters had been sent. The whispers stopped after I found her belongings. The house grew quiet, but questions lingered. Had she tried to escape through the attic? Had she nailed the door shut to keep him out or to keep herself in? The scratches on the frame faced inward, suggesting someone desperately trying to get out. I submitted everything to the authorities. They reopened the case, called it suspicious circumstances. But prosecuting a dead man brings no justice. The facility where she was supposedly transferred had no record of admission. The doctor who treated her had no backup files. The father who imprisoned her had taken his secrets to the grave. The house sold quickly once I finished the renovation. New family, fresh start. I didn't mention the history. Some stories are better left buried, but sometimes I wonder if the new owners hear whispers, if they smell flowers rotting in stagnant water, if they understand that some doors are nailed shut for reasons we can't comprehend. I kept one letter, the last one she wrote. It simply says, "If you're reading this, please remember that I existed. Please remember that I tried to get out." I remember. Crime 2, while painting the bedroom, I decided to swap the old wall outlets. They were cracked and yellowed. As I pulled one loose, I noticed a blinking light behind it, a tiny lens, a camera. I froze. There was no SD card, no battery, just wires running deep into the wall. I followed the path and discovered more, 5 in total. Living room, kitchen, bathroom, all hidden, all active, but I hadn't installed them. I called the landlord. He denied everything. That night, a note slid under my door, just 3 words, "You look scared." I haven't slept since. The silence in my apartment felt different after that discovery. Every creak of the floorboards carried weight. I traced the wiring back through the walls, following the path with my fingertips along the baseboards. The cables led to a central junction box in the basement utility room. My hands trembled as I pried it open. Inside, a small recording device hummed quietly, its red light pulsing like a heartbeat. The memory card was nearly full. I pulled it out and slipped it into my laptop. File after file of footage appeared on screen. Weeks of my life captured in digital fragments. Me cooking breakfast, working at my desk, talking on the phone. But there were older files too, from before I moved in. Different people, different routines. The previous tenant, a woman with dark, curly hair, appeared in dozens of videos. She seemed unaware of being watched, just like I had been. The footage showed her daily patterns shifting over time. She started locking doors that were never locked before. She began checking windows repeatedly. In one video, she stood in the bathroom mirror, touching her face where a bruise had formed. She spoke to someone off camera, her voice barely audible through the audio. "I keep feeling like someone's watching me," she whispered. I fast-forwarded through more files. The woman's behavior became increasingly erratic. She covered mirrors with towels. She unplugged appliances. She slept on the couch instead of the bedroom. In the final videos, she was packing boxes with urgent, jerky movements. Then she was gone. The landlord had told me she moved out because of a job transfer. Nothing about why she left so suddenly. Nothing about the security deposit she never collected. I scrolled through the contact information she'd left behind and found her number. My finger hovered over the call button. What would I even say? When I finally dialed, the line went straight to a disconnected message. I tried social media, reverse lookup services, anything to find her, but it was as if she had vanished completely. No digital footprint, no forwarding address, no trace that she had ever existed beyond these surveillance files. I examined the recording device more carefully. Professional-grade equipment, not something a casual voyeur would use. The timestamp showed continuous recording for over 2 years. 2 years of watching tenants without their knowledge. I checked the property records and discovered something disturbing. The building had changed hands frequently. Different management companies, but always the same private owner listed in the fine print. The next morning, I confronted my landlord again. He seemed nervous this time, avoiding eye contact as he insisted he knew nothing about any cameras. His hands shook slightly as he lit a cigarette. Maybe the previous owner installed them, he suggested. Maybe they're not even functional. But I had the footage. I had proof they were very much functional. When I mentioned the files, his face went pale. "You shouldn't have gone through those," he said quietly. "Some things are better left alone." That evening, I noticed someone had been in my apartment. Nothing was missing, but small things were moved. A book left open to a different page. A coffee cup repositioned on the counter. The paranoia that had consumed the previous tenant began seeping into my own thoughts. I installed new locks, covered the camera locations with tape, but the feeling of being observed never left. I started sleeping with a chair propped against the door. I kept the curtains drawn. I found myself checking over my shoulder constantly, scanning faces in the street for signs of recognition. The woman in the videos had exhibited the same behaviors before she disappeared. The pattern was repeating itself. Late one night, I heard footsteps in the hallway that stopped directly outside my door. I held my breath, waiting. The footsteps moved away, but something had been slipped under the door. Another note, written in the same block letters. "The walls have eyes. The walls remember everything." I packed a bag and stayed at a hotel for 3 days, trying to decide what to do next. When I returned, the cameras were gone. The wires had been cut and removed. The junction box in the basement was empty. Even the recording device had vanished. It was as if none of it had ever existed. But I still had the memory card hidden in my jacket pocket, hours of footage proving what had happened. I considered going to the police, but what would I tell them? That my landlord might be involved in something sinister, that a previous tenant had vanished under suspicious circumstances. Without her testimony, without her body, what crime had actually been committed? I moved out the following week. Found a new place across town, ran background checks on the landlord, inspected every outlet and fixture myself. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if the surveillance was connected to something larger. A network of watchers, a system of control that extended beyond just one building. The woman in the videos haunts my thoughts. Her escalating fear, her sudden disappearance, her complete erasure from public records. Did she simply run away, or did something worse happen? Was she the first, or just another in a long line of unwitting subjects? I still check the news occasionally, searching for missing person reports that might match her description. I still look over my shoulder when walking alone. The cameras are gone, but the feeling of being watched has never completely faded. Sometimes I catch myself covering mirrors, unplugging appliances, sleeping on the couch instead of the bed. The truth is, I never found out who was watching or why. The landlord sold the building and moved away. The management company dissolved. The paper trail went cold. But somewhere in this city, there might be other apartments, other tenants, other cameras hidden behind cracked and yellowed wall outlets. And somewhere there might be footage of me, filed away in someone's collection, a digital ghost of a life lived under constant, invisible observation. Crime 3, I moved out of that building after what happened. Months passed and curiosity pulled me back just to visit. The hallway was the same, but the person who opened the door to my old unit chilled my blood. Same height, same haircut, and they were wearing my jacket, a custom one stitched with initials I had removed years ago. They looked at me like I was the intruder. They shut the door before I could speak. A week later, I got mail addressed to me, but delivered to their apartment. Someone's living my life better than I did, and they're not stopping. The building superintendent avoided my eyes when I asked about the new tenant. His hands fidgeted with his keys, making them jingle in a nervous rhythm that echoed off the empty lobby walls. He mumbled something about privacy policies and hurried away, leaving behind the faint smell of cheap aftershave and something else I couldn't place, something metallic and sharp. I started watching from the coffee shop across the street. The new tenant kept my old routine perfectly. They left at the same morning hour I used to, wearing my burgundy scarf, the one I thought I'd lost in the move. They carried my leather briefcase, the one with the scratch on the corner from when I dropped it rushing to catch the subway. But I had that briefcase in my new apartment. I checked that night, running my fingers over the familiar scratch, my skin prickling with goosebumps. The mail kept coming, credit card statements for accounts I'd closed, a subscription renewal for a magazine I'd canceled. The postal worker, a woman with tired eyes and calloused hands, told me she'd been delivering to that address for months. She knew me, she said. I'd always been polite, always tipped well during the holidays, but I'd never met her before that day. I found the key under the loose brick by the service entrance. The same hiding spot I'd used for emergencies. My fingers trembled as I turned it in the lock, the metal warm against my palm despite the cold evening air. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it, down to the coffee ring stain on the wooden table and the book I'd never finished reading, still open to page 147. But there were additions, photos of me in frames I'd never owned, taken in places I'd never been. In one, I stood next to someone whose face had been carefully cut out, leaving only their shadow visible. My smile looked wrong, too wide, too forced. The photo paper felt strange between my fingers, thicker than normal, almost waxy. The closet held my entire wardrobe, clothes I knew I'd packed and moved, hanging in the exact order I'd always kept them. My winter coat was there, still smelling of the perfume I used to wear but had stopped using after moving. Underneath, I found boxes of documents, lease agreements signed in my handwriting, but for dates when I was living elsewhere. Medical records with my name but describing procedures I'd never had. Bank statements showing transactions I'd never made, purchases I'd never authorized. A journal sat on the nightstand, filled with entries in my handwriting describing days I'd never lived. The ink looked fresh, as if someone had been writing in it recently. The entries spoke of loneliness, of wanting to disappear, of envying someone who seemed to have everything I wanted. The last entry was dated the day I'd moved out. It read, "Today I become myself, finally." I heard footsteps in the hallway. The new tenant was coming home. I hid in the bathroom, pressing my back against the cold tile wall, my heart pounding so hard I was sure it would give me away. The front door opened with a familiar creak. They moved through the apartment with practiced ease, knowing exactly which floorboards would groan, which cabinet doors would stick. Through the keyhole, I watched them change clothes. They folded my jacket, the one they'd been wearing, with the same precise movements I'd always used. They hung it in the exact spot where I used to keep it. Then they pulled out a photo album I'd never seen before. Page after page of pictures showing a life I'd apparently lived but couldn't remember. Birthday parties where I looked happy. Vacation photos where I smiled genuinely. A life that seemed fuller, richer than the one I actually remembered living. They picked up the phone and dialed a number. I recognized the voice that answered, my sister, the one I hadn't spoken to in years after our falling out. But they talked like old friends, discussing plans for the upcoming holidays, sharing inside jokes I'd never heard before. My sister laughed at something they said, a warm sound I hadn't heard directed at me in so long I'd forgotten what it sounded like. When they hung up, they pulled out a laptop and began typing. I could see the screen from my hiding spot. They were responding to emails sent to my address, maintaining conversations with people I thought had forgotten about me. Former colleagues invited me to lunch. Old friends shared memories of good times I couldn't recall having. A dating profile showed recent activity, matches and messages that painted a picture of someone much more social than I'd ever been. I waited until they fell asleep before slipping out, but as I reached the door, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. On the kitchen counter sat a stack of job applications, all filled out in my handwriting, all for positions I'd applied for and been rejected from during my worst months of unemployment. But according to the dates, these applications had been submitted after I'd already found my current job. Someone had continued trying to build my career after I'd given up. The building's security footage, which I convinced the night guard to let me review, showed me entering and leaving the building regularly throughout the months I'd been living elsewhere. The timestamp matched up with the journal entries I'd found, but I had no memory of any of those visits. The person on the camera moved like me, held their shoulders the way I did when I was nervous, even had the same unconscious habit of touching their left earlobe when thinking. I confronted the building manager the next day. He looked at me strangely when I insisted I'd moved out months ago. According to his records, I'd never left. My rent was current, paid automatically from an account I'd closed. When I showed him my lease for my new apartment, he examined it with growing confusion. Same signature, same handwriting, but somehow I was apparently living in two places at once. The new tenant, or was I the intruder, had created a life that seemed more authentically mine than the one I was actually living. They maintained relationships I'd let fade, pursued opportunities I'd abandoned, lived with a confidence and social ease I'd never possessed. The life they'd built using my identity was everything I'd wanted but never managed to achieve. I returned to my current apartment that night, but nothing felt familiar anymore. The walls seemed too white, the furniture too impersonal. I opened my closet and found it half empty, clothes I was certain I owned nowhere to be found. My medication bottles were missing, though I couldn't remember when I'd last taken them. Even my birth certificate had vanished from my file cabinet, leaving behind only the faint outline of dust where it used to rest. The person living my old life had become more me than I was. They'd fixed the mistakes I'd made, healed the relationships I'd broken, seized the chances I'd let slip by. But somewhere in the process, I'd begun to fade, not just from that building, but from my own existence. I still drive by sometimes, watching from the street as they live the life I should have had. The life I maybe did have, in some version of events I can no longer trust myself to remember. They wave at neighbors who used to ignore me. They smile with genuine warmth I'd forgotten how to feel. And sometimes, late at night in my sterile apartment, I wonder if I'm the one who doesn't belong. If maybe the person wearing my clothes and living my life is simply the version of me that deserved to exist. The one who didn't run away when things got difficult. The one who stayed. Crime 4, my roommate and I were cleaning the kitchen when we noticed a draft near the pantry. Behind the shelves, we found a small wooden panel wedged in the wall. We thought it was just old construction until we pried it open and saw stairs, dusty, narrow, leading downward. The air smelled like rust and mold. At the bottom was a room, no furniture, just walls covered in claw marks. And then we heard the scream, not loud, not panicked, just persistent, like someone asking to be remembered. We sealed it up, but the sound hasn't stopped. It's not coming from below anymore. The first thing I did was check the property records. The house was built in the early 60s, changed hands 7 times since then. Each transfer seemed rushed, prices dropping with every sale. I ran my fingers along the photocopied documents, feeling the impressions left by previous owners' signatures. Some pressed so hard the pen nearly tore through the paper. Others barely touched the surface, as if they couldn't wait to sign away their claim. The real estate agent who sold us the place had mentioned nothing about basement renovations. When I called her office, the receptionist put me on hold for what felt like forever. Music played while I stared at that sealed panel, now covered with a bookshelf we dragged in front of it. When she finally came back on the line, her voice had changed, tighter, more careful. She said the previous owner had been an elderly woman who lived alone. Natural causes, she claimed, but there was something in the way she said it, like she was reading from a script. I asked about the basement, long pause. Then she mentioned that some older homes had root cellars or storage spaces that weren't always documented in the original blueprints. I started asking neighbors about the house. The woman next door had lived there for decades. She remembered the elderly owner, described her as quiet, kept to herself. But when I mentioned the basement, her expression shifted. She glanced toward our house, then back at me, wrapping her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. She told me about sounds coming from that property late during certain periods. Not every day, but regularly enough that she'd started closing her bedroom window. Scratching sounds, she said, sometimes voices. She'd assumed it was the old woman talking to herself, maybe playing radio programs too loud. People do that when they get lonely. But then she mentioned something else. The old woman had a visitor once, years back, a younger man who came by during odd hours. He never stayed long, but the neighbor noticed he always parked several houses down, walked the rest of the way. She thought it was strange, but minded her own business. After a while, she stopped seeing him. Around the same period, the late sounds from the house became more frequent. I found myself returning to those property records, studying the dates more carefully. The elderly woman had purchased the house just 2 years before her death. Before that, it had belonged to a family for nearly a decade. I managed to track down their forwarding address through the county clerk's office. The mother answered the phone when I called. Her voice became strained when I mentioned the address. She didn't want to talk about it, said they'd left for personal reasons, but I pressed gently, mentioned the basement space we discovered. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally she spoke. Her teenage son had started having problems while they lived there. Behavioral changes, nightmares. He'd wake up claiming he heard someone calling his name from inside the walls. They'd searched the house thoroughly, found nothing unusual, but the problems persisted. Eventually, they decided to relocate. She asked if we'd found anything down there. When I described the scratched walls, she made a small sound, almost like a sigh of recognition. She said her son had developed a habit of scratching at his bedroom walls during those final months. They'd repainted twice, but he'd always start again. The scratches were never random. They formed patterns, almost like words, but nothing they could read. I hung up feeling unsettled. That afternoon, I convinced my roommate to help me move the bookshelf again. We needed to look at those scratch marks more carefully. The wood panel creaked as we pried it open, and the musty air rushed out like a held breath being released. Down in that hidden room, I brought a flashlight and examined the walls more closely. The scratches weren't random at all. They formed letters, crude but deliberate. Most were illegible, worn smooth by time and moisture. But in one corner I could make out fragments of words, help, please, and something that looked like a name, though I couldn't be certain. My roommate refused to go down there again after that first visit. Said the air felt wrong, too thick to breathe properly. But I found myself returning, drawn by a growing certainty that someone had been kept in that space. The scratches were too organized, too purposeful to be anything else. I started researching missing persons reports from the area going back decades. The local library had archived newspapers on microfilm. I spent hours scrolling through old editions, looking for anyone who disappeared without explanation. There were several cases, but one stood out. A young man who'd vanished during the period when the elderly woman first moved into the house. The missing persons report was brief. He'd been staying with relatives temporarily, had mentioned finding work but never specified where. His family assumed he'd moved away for employment opportunities. They'd filed the report after several months of no contact, but the investigation had gone nowhere. No leads, no evidence of foul play. I stared at his photograph in the newspaper. Something about his face seemed familiar, though I couldn't place where I might have seen him before. I made copies of the article and took them home, spreading them across my kitchen table alongside the property records. That was when I noticed the pattern. The missing persons report was filed just weeks before the elderly woman started making regular trips to the hardware store. I'd found her name in the store's old customer database while researching the house's history. She'd purchased rope, duct tape, cleaning supplies, always paid in cash. The store clerk who'd served her remembered her well. She'd been nervous, he said, always looking over her shoulder. She'd ask about the strongest rope they carried, claimed she needed to secure tarps for home repairs. But she never bought tarps, just rope, tape, and industrial-strength cleaners. I went back to that basement room one more time. This time I brought a small hand shovel and carefully scraped away some of the dirt floor in one corner where the scratches seemed to concentrate. About 6 inches down, I found something that made my blood run cold. Fabric, just a small piece, but clearly from clothing. I stopped digging immediately. This wasn't something I could handle alone anymore. But when I called the police to report what I'd found, they seemed skeptical. The officer who took my statement said they'd need more evidence before opening an investigation into a decades-old missing person case. The fabric could be from anything, he explained. Old houses often had buried debris from previous renovations. But I knew what I'd found, and more importantly, I knew those scratch marks hadn't been made by some troubled teenager having nightmares. They'd been carved by someone trapped, someone trying to leave a message for whoever might eventually find them. The sounds we'd been hearing weren't coming from below anymore because there was nothing left down there but evidence of what had happened. The screaming had moved upstairs into the walls around us because some truths refused to stay buried. I still live in that house. My roommate moved out shortly after I told them what I'd discovered. The police never followed up on my report. The basement room remains sealed, but I hear those sounds every few days. Not screaming anymore, more like whispers, like someone trying to tell me their name. Sometimes I wonder if the elderly woman was the only one who knew what had happened down there. Or if there were others, people who bought the house knowing its history, living with that knowledge until they couldn't bear it anymore and had to sell, had to pass the secret along to someone else. I've thought about moving, but something keeps me here. Maybe it's the feeling that someone is still waiting to be found, to be remembered properly. Or maybe it's the growing certainty that I'm the only one willing to listen to what those whispers are trying to tell me. The real estate agent calls sometimes, asking if I'm interested in selling. Her voice still has that careful quality, like she knows exactly why she's calling. I always tell her no. Someone has to stay. Someone has to keep hearing those sounds, even if no one else believes they're real. Because the truth is, I'm not entirely sure anymore if I found that basement room by accident, or if it was waiting for me all along. Crime 5. At a flea market, I flipped through an old photo album. The vendor said it came from an estate sale. Most of the images were boring birthdays, holidays, old houses. Then I saw myself in the background, behind a tree, on a porch, even standing near the family in a group shot. Same face, same clothes, image after image. I've never met those people, never been to those places. I bought the album out of panic. That night, someone slipped a Polaroid under my door. It was me again. But this time, I was standing in my own hallway. I spread the photos across my kitchen table under the harsh fluorescent light. The smell of old paper mixed with something else, something metallic that made my stomach turn. Each image felt like a violation, but I couldn't stop staring. The family seemed normal enough, a mother with tired eyes, a father who never quite smiled, 3 children at various ages. But there I was, lurking in their memories like a ghost they never noticed. The strange thing wasn't just my presence, it was how natural I looked. In one photo, I'm leaning against their fence during what appears to be a backyard barbecue. My posture is relaxed, comfortable, as if I belonged there. In another, I'm visible through their kitchen window while they eat dinner, my face partially obscured by curtains but unmistakably mine. The quality of these images suggested they weren't doctored. The grain, the color saturation, the way light fell across surfaces, everything felt authentic. I called the estate sale company. The woman on the phone sounded annoyed when I asked about the deceased homeowner. She gave me basic information reluctantly. The family had lived in their house for over 30 years. The father had passed away recently and the mother had moved to assisted living. No one else had shown interest in the photo albums. I asked if she remembered anything unusual about the family, any stories. She paused, then mentioned that neighbors had always found them odd. They kept to themselves, rarely spoke to anyone, and there were rumors about strange visitors at odd hours. That detail gnawed at me, strange visitors. I studied the photos again, this time focusing on the backgrounds. Other people appeared in some shots, friends, relatives, neighbors perhaps, but none of them looked out of place the way I did. They were all clearly invited, clearly meant to be there. I was different. I was watching. I decided to visit the old neighborhood. The house stood empty now, with a for sale sign planted in the dead grass. I parked across the street and tried to match the angles from the photographs. The fence where I appeared to be leaning was still there, weathered but intact. The kitchen window was clearly visible from the sidewalk. Standing there, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. This was real. I had been here before somehow. A neighbor emerged from the house next door, eyeing me suspiciously. I approached her carefully, explaining that I was researching the family's history for personal reasons. She relaxed slightly but remained guarded. She told me the family had always been secretive. The children rarely played outside, and when they did, they seemed nervous, constantly looking over their shoulders. The mother barely left the house except for necessities. The father worked irregular hours and came home at strange times. What bothered her most, she said, was the feeling of being watched, not by the family but by someone else. She'd sometimes glimpse a figure in her peripheral vision, someone who shouldn't be there. When she turned to look directly, nothing, just shadows and empty spaces. Her voice dropped to a whisper when she mentioned finding footprints in her garden that didn't match any of her family's shoes. Fresh prints that appeared overnight and led to nowhere. I thanked her and walked away, but her words echoed in my mind. The feeling of being watched, fresh footprints, someone who shouldn't be there. I drove home with sweaty palms gripping the steering wheel, checking my rearview mirror constantly. The Polaroid that had been slipped under my door was still on my kitchen counter. In it, I stood in my own hallway, but something about the lighting was wrong. The shadows fell differently than they should have. The angle suggested the photo was taken from inside my bedroom. That realization sent ice through my veins. Someone had been in my house. Someone had photographed me without my knowledge, just as they had apparently done with the family in the album. But who and why? I began obsessing over every detail of my daily routine. Did I lock the door that morning? Had I noticed anything out of place? I installed additional locks, security cameras, motion sensors. For weeks, nothing happened. The cameras showed only my own movements, my own paranoid checking and rechecking of windows and doors. Then I found another photo. This one was tucked inside my morning newspaper, creased and faded like the others. It showed me sleeping in my bed, but the angle was impossible. The shot was taken from directly above, as if someone had been suspended from the ceiling. The timestamp in the corner indicated it was taken 3 nights ago. I checked my security footage for that night. Nothing, just me, alone, sleeping peacefully while someone documented my vulnerability. The pattern was becoming clear, but the logic remained elusive. Someone had been photographing the family for years, appearing in their most private moments like an invisible witness. Now they were doing the same to me. But the photos of me with the family suggested this had been happening long before I discovered the album. How was that possible? I returned to the album with fresh eyes, examining each photo with a magnifying glass. In one image, taken during what appeared to be the youngest child's birthday party, I noticed something I'd missed before. The child was looking directly at me in the photo, not at the camera or the celebration, but at me. His expression wasn't fear or confusion, it was recognition. He knew I was there. This discovery led me to track down the surviving family members. The mother was reluctant to speak at first, but when I mentioned the photos, her demeanor changed completely. She became agitated, almost frantic. She insisted that she remembered me, that I had been around for years, always watching, always present, but never interacting. She called me the shadow man and said the children had nightmares about me. But that was impossible. I had no memory of these encounters, no recollection of ever seeing this family before the flea market. Yet here was evidence, photographic proof, that I had been stalking them for years without my own knowledge. The mother's descriptions of my behavior were precise and consistent. She knew details about my mannerisms, my clothing, even the way I stood with my hands in my pockets when I thought no one was looking. As I left the assisted living facility, I caught my reflection in the lobby mirror. For just a moment, I didn't recognize myself. The face staring back seemed familiar but foreign, like seeing yourself in a dream. I wondered if memory could be selectively erased, if someone could make you forget entire periods of your life while leaving photographic evidence behind like breadcrumbs. The investigation had become personal in a way I hadn't anticipated. I wasn't just trying to solve the mystery of the photos, I was trying to figure out who I really was and what I might have done. The line between victim and perpetrator was blurring with each new discovery. Every night I lay awake wondering if somewhere in someone else's house, new photos were being taken. Photos I would never remember posing for, of people I would claim never to have met. The album sits on my kitchen table now, still spread open under that harsh fluorescent light. Sometimes I catch myself staring at those images for hours, trying to remember, trying to understand. The metallic smell has grown stronger, and I've begun to notice it in other places too, in my car, at the grocery store, even in my dreams. Yesterday I found a new photo album at another flea market. different family, different house, different vendor. But there I was again, standing in their backyard during what looked like a graduation party. The date on the back suggested it was taken just last month. I bought this album too, adding it to my growing collection of evidence against myself. The truth is becoming unavoidable, even as it remains incomprehensible. I am somehow living a double life that I cannot remember, documenting families I have never consciously met, leaving traces of myself in places I have never meant to go. Whether this makes me victim or predator, I can no longer tell. The photos don't lie, but my memory offers no answers. Tonight I'll set up more cameras, install more locks, take more precautions against an intruder who might very well be myself. Tomorrow I'll visit more estate sales, look through more albums, hoping to find fewer pictures of my face among strangers' precious memories. But I know I'll find more, I always do. The question that haunts me isn't who is taking these photos anymore. The question is whether I want to remember the answer. Crime 6, she came highly recommended, polite, sweet, quiet. My son liked her, I liked her. Everything was fine until I found the knife, tucked under his pillow, blade facing inward. No fingerprints, no explanation. When I confronted her, she smiled, not nervously, knowingly. I fired her, changed the locks. Days later, my son told me about the game she taught him. The one where he had to stay completely still while someone crept around the room in the dark. I asked him how many times they played. He said, only when I was sleeping. I don't think the game is over. The knife was small, the kind you'd use for cutting fruit. Stainless steel with a black handle, nothing remarkable except for where I found it. The blade was clean, almost surgical in its precision. I held it in my palm, feeling its weight, wondering how long it had been there. My son slept peacefully that night, unaware of what lay beneath his head. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was eating something upstairs, forgot about it. Maybe it fell from her bag, but the positioning was too deliberate. The blade pointed toward where his neck would rest. Someone had placed it there with purpose. The next morning I called her. She answered on the first ring, her voice bright and cheerful, like she'd been expecting me. I told her about the knife. The silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of her breathing. Then she laughed, soft and musical. I have no idea what you're talking about, she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. I studied the knife again after hanging up. There were no scratches on the blade, no wear on the handle. It looked new, unused. I wrapped it in a kitchen towel and placed it in my dresser drawer, evidence of what I wasn't sure yet. The recommendation had come from a colleague whose children she'd watched for months. She's wonderful, she'd told me. The kids adore her. She's so creative with games and activities. I called her back, asked more specific questions. Had she ever noticed anything unusual, any odd behavior? No, she insisted. She's perfect. Why are you asking? I couldn't explain the knife without sounding paranoid. Instead, I asked if she'd ever gone through her children's belongings after the babysitter left. A pause. What kind of question is that? She asked. I could hear defensiveness creeping into her voice. She's been watching my children for months. I trust her completely. But trust is fragile. It shatters when you find sharp objects in your child's bed. I decided to investigate further. I drove to the address she'd given me, a small apartment complex on the outskirts of town. The building was older, paint peeling from the exterior walls. I sat in my car across the street, watching. After an hour, I saw her emerge from a ground floor unit. She looked different in daylight, older somehow. She carried a small bag, the kind that could easily conceal a knife. She walked to a nearby playground where several children were playing. I watched her approach a woman with a toddler, striking up a conversation. They talked for several minutes, the woman nodding enthusiastically. I saw her pull out her phone, presumably giving the woman her number. another family, another opportunity. I followed her to 2 more locations that day. Each time the same pattern: casual conversation with parents, exchanged contact information, promises to help with childcare. She was building a network, collecting families like specimens. That evening I sat my son down for a conversation. He was 6, old enough to understand but young enough to be honest. I asked him about the games they played. His face lit up. "She taught me so many games," he said. "The quiet game, the sleeping game, the secret game." "Tell me about the sleeping game," I said, keeping my voice steady. She would turn off all the lights and tell me to close my eyes and pretend to sleep. Then she would walk around my room really quietly, like a ghost. I had to stay perfectly still, even if I heard her moving things around. She said it was practice for when real ghosts come. My skin prickled. What kind of things did she move around? Just stuff, my toys, my clothes. Sometimes she would open my closet and look inside. She said she was checking for monsters, but I think she was looking for something else. I pressed him for more details. The secret game involved her taking photos of him while he slept, telling him it was for a scrapbook she was making. She'd shown him the photos on her phone, images of him in various sleeping positions, his room from different angles. She said all the good babysitters keep photo albums of the children they watch, he explained. The pieces were forming a disturbing picture. The knife might have been a test, a way to see how close she could get, how much she could manipulate without detection. But a test for what? I called the police, but without clear evidence of a crime, they couldn't do much. The knife proved nothing. The photos could be explained away as innocent documentation. The games were unusual but not illegal. I was told to keep the knife as evidence and to document any further contact. She tried calling me twice that week. I didn't answer. She left voicemails, her voice concerned and confused. "I'm not sure what I did wrong," she said in the first message. "I really enjoyed working with your family. Please call me back so we can talk this through." The second message was different. Her voice was calmer, more controlled. "I understand you're upset about something. I just want you to know that I really care about your son. I think about him often. I hope he's doing well with his sleeping." I saved both messages and added them to my growing file of evidence. I also installed a security system, cameras in every room, motion sensors on all the doors and windows. I wasn't taking any chances. 2 weeks later, my colleague called me. Her voice was shaky. "You asked me about the babysitter," she said. "I need to tell you something. I found photos on my daughter's tablet, pictures of her sleeping taken from different angles. When I asked her about them, she said the babysitter took them for a special project." We compared notes, the photos, the games, the subtle boundary crossing. A pattern was emerging, but the purpose remained unclear. We decided to contact other families in the area, see if anyone else had similar experiences. The search led us to a disturbing discovery. 3 other families reported similar incidents, strange games involving sleeping and stillness, unexplained objects left in children's rooms, photos taken without parental knowledge, and in each case the babysitter had come highly recommended, presenting herself as experienced and trustworthy. But here's what troubled me most. Despite all the evidence we'd gathered, despite the clear pattern of inappropriate behavior, nothing could be proven. No laws had been broken. No children had been physically harmed. The knife could have been planted by anyone. The photos could be explained as innocent documentation. The games were unusual but not criminal. I still have the knife in my drawer. Sometimes I take it out and examine it, looking for clues I might have missed. The blade remains pristine, the handle unmarked. It sits there like a question mark, a symbol of everything I can't understand or prove. My son still talks about the games sometimes. He asks when the babysitter is coming back, says he misses playing with her. When I tell him she won't be returning, he looks disappointed. But she was so good at the games, he says. She knew exactly how to play them. I wonder what she was really doing in those rooms, what she was looking for or preparing for. The knife suggests something darker than games, something that required a weapon. But without more evidence, I'm left with suspicions and a small blade that might mean everything or nothing. The most unsettling part is that she's still out there, still building her network of families, still playing her games. I've warned everyone I can, but she's careful, patient. She knows how to present herself, how to gain trust, how to operate just within the boundaries of acceptable behavior. I keep the knife as a reminder that danger doesn't always announce itself with violence or obvious threats. Sometimes it comes quietly, recommended by friends, welcomed into our homes with smiles and promises of help. Sometimes it leaves only questions and the lingering sense that we've glimpsed something terrible without fully understanding what we've seen. The game, as my son said, isn't over. I'm just not sure who's playing it anymore. Crime 7, I live in a rural area, so finding wildlife nearby isn't rare, but this was different. A raccoon, clean, untouched by predators, lay curled on my welcome mat. It had a leather collar around its neck. No tag, just a carved symbol I couldn't place. I threw it out thinking it was a prank. The next day there were 2 more animals, different species, same collar, same symbol. I checked my security cameras, but they all showed static during the night. The 3rd day, no animals appeared. Just the collar left on my pillow. The leather was soft between my fingers, worn smooth like something handled repeatedly. The carved symbol looked crude but deliberate, 3 intersecting lines forming a triangle with a dot in the center. I traced it with my thumb, feeling the grooves where someone had pressed too hard with their knife. I called the sheriff's office. The deputy who arrived seemed more interested in my coffee than the collar. He turned it over in his hands, shrugged, said kids probably, but his eyes kept darting to my windows and he left faster than he came. That evening I drove to the diner where locals gather. The conversation stopped when I walked in. I showed the waitress the collar, asked if she'd seen the symbol before. Her face went pale. She glanced toward the kitchen, then back to me, shaking her head too quickly. The cook, a heavy-set man with tattoos covering his forearms, stepped out and stared at what I held. He wiped his hands on his apron, the motion slow and deliberate. "Where'd you find that?" His voice carried an edge I couldn't identify. I explained about the animals, the cameras, the pillow. He listened without blinking, then disappeared into the back room. The waitress refilled my coffee cup with trembling hands. "You should probably go," she whispered. At home, I searched online for similar symbols. Hours passed before I found something close, a marking used by underground animal fighting rings. My stomach turned. I thought about the raccoon's peaceful expression, how clean it looked, how carefully it had been positioned. The phone rang near dawn, unknown number. I answered to heavy breathing, then a woman's voice, cracked and desperate. "Stop looking for answers. Some things should stay buried." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I spent the following days asking questions around town. The librarian remembered seeing the symbol in old police records, something about missing pets from years back. The veterinarian's assistant went quiet when I mentioned animal fighting, then suggested I speak to someone who used to work at the shelter. The former employee lived in a trailer surrounded by chain-link fencing. She invited me in but kept the curtains drawn. Her living room smelled like bleach and fear. They took animals for training, she said, her words barely audible. Dogs, cats, raccoons, anything that would fight or make the dogs meaner. There was this group, called themselves something fancy, but they just liked watching things suffer. She showed me a folder of photographs, animals with injuries, cages stacked in basements, men in expensive clothing placing bets while dogs tore each other apart. I tried to report it. The police said there wasn't enough evidence. Then my own dog disappeared. Found him a week later with that same collar, same symbol. He was alive but different. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't play. Just stared at the walls until he died. Her hands shook as she closed the folder. The leader had connections. Money changes what people see and don't see. After my dog died, I got scared and moved here. Thought it was over. I asked who the leader was. She looked at me like I'd asked her to cut off her own hand. You really don't know. He runs the biggest business in town. Everyone knows his trucks, his workers, but nobody talks about what happens in that warehouse behind the feed store. I knew the place, everyone did. The owner always seemed respectable, donated to local charities, sponsored youth sports teams, smiled and waved during parades. His name appeared on half the buildings downtown. That night I parked across from the warehouse. It looked empty, but a faint light glowed from a basement window. I waited until the street was completely dark, then crept closer. The smell hit me first, antiseptic mixed with something organic and wrong. Through the window I saw cages lined against concrete walls. Most were empty, but in the corner something moved. A dog, thin and scarred, paced in a circle. It wore a collar identical to the one I'd found. As I watched, a man descended the stairs carrying a bucket. Even in the dim light, I recognized his silhouette, the warehouse owner, the town's most respected citizen. He approached the dog's cage and spoke in a voice too low for me to hear. The animal cowered against the bars. He unlocked the cage, reached inside, and attached something to the collar, a small device blinking red. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering, the collar on my pillow. Had it been recording, watching? I thought about the static on my security cameras, the timing of everything. The next morning I found a note slipped under my door. My name written in block letters, nothing else. Just my name over and over, filling the entire page. I called the state police, bypassed the local sheriff entirely. The detective who came seemed genuinely concerned. We drove to the warehouse together, but it was empty. Clean concrete floors, no cages, no smell, just stored grain and farming equipment. Maybe you misunderstood what you saw, the detective suggested. Stress can make people imagine things. But I knew what I'd witnessed. The detective gave me his card, said to call if anything else happened. As he drove away, I noticed the warehouse owner's truck parked at the diner. He sat by the window, watching me through the glass. I haven't found any more animals. The calls stopped. The warehouse looks normal during the day, workers loading trucks, conducting regular business. But sometimes, late at night, I see that basement light glowing. I hear sounds that might be barking or might be something else entirely. The collar disappeared from my dresser drawer where I'd been keeping it. I never heard anyone enter my house. The lock wasn't broken. Nothing else was missing. People in town treat me differently now. Conversations end when I approach. The waitress at the diner avoids eye contact. Even the mailman seems nervous when he delivers my letters. I think about the woman's voice on the phone, warning me to stop looking for answers. I think about the former shelter employee who moved away the day after our conversation, leaving no forwarding address. I think about the detective who seemed so helpful but did nothing when faced with an empty warehouse. The truth is, I don't know who to trust anymore. The animals, the collars, the symbol, everything feels connected to something larger and darker than I initially understood. But every lay dissolves when I try to follow it. Every witness disappears or changes their story. Maybe that's the point. Maybe some crimes aren't meant to be solved by people like me. Maybe the system works exactly as intended, protecting those with money and power while the rest of us are left with questions and fear. I still live in the same house, still check my doorstep every morning. No more animals have appeared, but I keep expecting them. The symbol haunts my dreams, those three intersecting lines, that single dot in the center. Sometimes I catch myself carving it into napkins or writing it in the margins of books. I wonder if that's how it spreads, if that's how they mark people who get too close to the truth, if I'm becoming part of whatever darkness I try to expose. The rural silence that once comforted me now feels oppressive. Every sound could be footsteps, every shadow could be watching, every phone call could be the voice telling me to stop looking for answers that were never meant to be found. Crime 8, renovating the old cabin, was supposed to be a project, a peaceful break. But when I tore up the bedroom floor, I found something buried in the dirt, an old wooden box wrapped in fabric and bound with twine. Inside were children's drawings, crude, dark. One showed a house on fire, another showed a figure chained to a tree. But the last one, it was of me, my face, my clothes, standing beside the open floor. Someone buried a prediction beneath where I sleep, and it's only halfway complete. The drawings smelled of mildew and something else I couldn't identify, something organic, decaying. I held them up to the light streaming through the dusty window, studying each line with growing unease. The child's hand that created these had pressed hard into the paper, leaving deep grooves where the crayon had scraped against rough wood beneath. I called the previous owner, an elderly woman who'd inherited the cabin from her brother. Her voice trembled when I described what I'd found. "He never had children," she whispered, "never married, lived alone for 30 years. But children had been in this house. The evidence was in my hands, 3 drawings that told a story I didn't want to understand. The first showed flames consuming a structure that looked remarkably like the cabin I now owned. Orange and red scribbles reaching toward a black sky, small figures with their mouths open in silent screams. I researched the property records. The cabin had changed hands 7 times in 4 decades. Each owner stayed less than 5 years, most left without explanation. One family disappeared entirely, leaving behind furniture and personal belongings that the bank eventually sold. The second drawing depicted a tree I recognized, an old oak that stood behind the cabin, its branches twisted into unnatural shapes. In the child's rendering, chains wrapped around the trunk. A stick figure hung suspended, arms stretched toward the ground. The proportions were wrong, distorted, but the tree was unmistakable. I walked to that oak the next morning. The bark was scarred in places, deep grooves that could have been made by metal, could have been made by weather. I ran my fingers along the damaged wood, feeling the rough edges catch at my skin. At the base of the tree, the ground was soft, too soft, as if it had been disturbed and never properly settled. The third drawing haunted me most. My own face stared back from the crude sketch, recognizable despite the child's limited artistic ability. The same beard, the same glasses. Even the flannel shirt I'd worn while tearing up the floor was there, rendered in blue and green strokes. But it was the detail in the background that made my hands shake. The hole in the floor, the wooden box, and beside it another figure, smaller, watching. I showed the drawings to my neighbor, an old man who lived in the area his entire life. His face went pale when he saw them. There was a family, he said slowly. The previous owner's brother had visitors sometimes. A woman and her child. They'd stay for weeks, then disappear. This was decades ago. People minded their own business back then. He paused, studying the drawing of the burning house. There was a fire once, not at your cabin, but at another property nearby. A woman and her child died, never found out what started it. Some said it was suspicious. Others said it was just tragedy. The woman who'd sold me the cabin stopped answering my calls. When I drove to her address, the house was empty. Neighbors said she'd moved suddenly, leaving no forwarding information. But in her abandoned mailbox, I found a letter addressed to her brother, the man who'd owned my cabin. The postmark was from 20 years ago, but the envelope had never been opened. Inside was a child's letter, shaky handwriting on lined paper. Uncle, Mommy says we can't visit anymore. She says you hurt me, but I don't remember. I drew you pictures like you asked. I buried them where you said, please don't be mad. The signature was just a scribbled initial, but at the bottom of the page, in different handwriting, someone had written, he will find them someday. He will understand what you did. I returned to the oak tree with a shovel. The ground gave way easily, as if it had been excavated before. 3 feet down I found fabric, old clothing, small sizes, a child's shoe, and beneath that, bones that were too small, too fragile to belong to anyone who'd lived long enough to see justice. The final drawing made sense now. It wasn't a prediction, it was a map, a child's way of marking a grave, of ensuring someone would eventually understand. The figure watching from beside the hole wasn't meant to threaten, it was meant to witness. But questions remained. The elderly woman who'd sold me the cabin, her brother who'd lived here alone, the family that had disappeared. How many people had known? How many had chosen silence over truth? I contacted authorities, but the case was old. Evidence was circumstantial. The previous owner was dead. His sister had vanished. Without concrete proof of identity, without witnesses, the investigation stalled. The bones were real, but the story around them remained speculation. The cabin feels different now. The floor I'd torn up has been replaced, but I can still sense the hollow space beneath. Sometimes I wake in the night, certain I can hear small footsteps in the walls, scratching sounds that might be mice, or might be something else trying to communicate from places where voices can't reach. I've considered leaving, but something keeps me here. Maybe it's guilt over the child who tried so hard to leave clues to make someone understand. Maybe it's anger at the adults who failed to protect an innocent life. Or maybe it's the growing suspicion that my presence here wasn't random, that somehow I was meant to find those drawings, meant to uncover what others had buried and forgotten. The truth is, I'm not sure I trust my own memories anymore. Did I really tear up that floor by accident, or was I following some unconscious compulsion, drawn to that exact spot by knowledge I didn't realize I possessed? The drawing of my face was too accurate to be coincidence, too specific to be imagination. Some nights I find myself standing over the replaced floorboards, listening for sounds that aren't there, waiting for answers that may never come. The child who created those drawings is gone. The man who hurt them is gone. But the truth they tried to preserve remains, buried beneath layers of silence and time. Justice isn't always possible. Sometimes the best we can do is witness. Remember, refuse to let victims disappear completely into the darkness that claimed them. The drawings are safe now, stored where they can't be lost or destroyed. Evidence of a crime that may never be prosecuted, but will never again be forgotten. And sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, I wonder if that was enough. If bearing witness was what the child had hoped for all along. if the drawings were less about accusation and more about ensuring someone someday would care enough to remember their name, even if I'll never know what it was. Crime 9, she's not scared of anything, not thunder, not strangers, not even the vacuum. But something about the laundry room makes her freeze. Every time I open that door, she growls. One day I followed her gaze. The wall near the dryer looked off, slightly bulged. I knocked and heard a hollow sound. When I broke through, I found a cavity filled with old newspapers and bones. Small, human. I called the cops. They sealed it off. But now my dog growls at the closet in my bedroom. And I haven't opened it yet. The detective who came wore a cheap suit that smelled like stale cigarettes and coffee. He took notes while I talked, his pen scratching against paper in a rhythm that felt deliberate, practiced. When I mentioned the newspapers, he stopped writing and looked up. The dates on them, he asked. Did I remember the dates? I couldn't forget them. They were all from the same week, decades ago. The headlines talked about a missing family, a mother and 2 children who vanished without explanation. Their car was found abandoned by the highway, keys still in the ignition, groceries melting in the trunk. The case went cold, the detective said. It happens more than people think. My dog stayed in the kitchen while they worked, her ears flat against her head. She wouldn't even look toward the hallway. The forensics team arrived with their cameras and plastic bags, their faces masks of professional detachment. They worked methodically, measuring distances, taking photographs, whispering to each other in medical terms I didn't understand. The bones were sent to the lab. The newspapers were bagged as evidence. The wall was patched with temporary plywood that looked like a wound against the painted surface. But something felt incomplete, like a sentence cut off mid-thought. I started researching the missing family. The library had microfilm of old newspapers, the images grainy and yellow with age. The mother was described as devoted, the children as bright and well-behaved. They lived in a house that looked remarkably similar to mine, same layout, same vintage, same neighborhood developer. The photograph showed a woman with kind eyes and children who smiled easily for the camera. The previous owner of my house had been an elderly man who kept to himself. He died of natural causes, the realtor had said, heart failure. The house sat empty for 2 years before I bought it. The basement had been finished recently, the walls painted fresh white over what looked like older paneling. The laundry room was part of that renovation. I found the contractor's business card in a kitchen drawer, tucked behind takeout menus and expired coupons. The number was disconnected. The business license had expired years ago, but I found an address, a small apartment complex across town where the owner had lived. The building manager was a woman with suspicious eyes and hands that never stopped moving. She remembered him, she said, but only because he paid rent in cash and never caused trouble. He moved out suddenly, left no forwarding address. She still had some of his mail, she said, boxes of it in the basement. The postal service had stopped delivering it years ago. The mail was mostly bills and advertisements, but buried in the stack was a letter from a collections agency. The debt was for storage unit fees, unpaid for months. The facility was on the outskirts of town, surrounded by chain-link fencing and security cameras that may or may not have worked. The storage unit was small, barely large enough for a person to stand upright. It smelled of motor oil and something else, something organic and unpleasant. Most of the contents were ordinary old furniture, boxes of holiday decorations, tools that looked unused. But in the back corner, wrapped in plastic sheeting, were more newspapers and photographs. The photographs were personal, intimate. A family at dinner, children playing in a backyard, a woman hanging laundry on a line. They were taken from a distance, through windows, from hiding places. The woman in the photographs was the same one from the missing persons reports. The children were the same bright-eyed kids who had smiled for the camera. I brought the photographs to the detective. He studied them with the same professional detachment, but I saw something else in his expression, recognition, maybe, or confirmation of something he had already suspected. He asked me about the contractor, about the storage unit, about anything else I might have found. That's when I mentioned the closet in my bedroom. My dog had started growling at it, the same low, warning sound she made at the laundry room. The detective's pen stopped moving. He looked up from his notes, and for the first time, he seemed genuinely interested. We opened the closet together. Behind the hanging clothes, behind the boxes of seasonal items, was another section of wall that looked newer than the rest. The paint was a slightly different shade, the texture not quite matching. When we knocked, it sounded hollow. Inside was another cavity, smaller than the first. No bones this time, but more newspapers, more photographs, and something else, a journal written in careful handwriting, documenting surveillance, routine, vulnerabilities. The entries were clinical, detached, like field notes from a research project. The journal mentioned other houses, other families. It described methods, timing, disposal. It was methodical, organized, the work of someone who approached murder like a profession. The entry stopped abruptly, mid-sentence, as if the writer had been interrupted. The detective called for backup. More forensics teams arrived, more cameras, more plastic bags. They searched every wall, every corner, every surface. They found more cavities, more evidence, more proof of crimes that had gone undetected for years. But they never found the contractor. His real name was an alias, his identification forged, his past a carefully constructed fiction. He had vanished as completely as the families he had killed, leaving behind only his work, his trophies, his detailed records of systematic murder. The case made the news, but not the way I expected. The reports focused on the discovery, the investigation, the technical details of forensic analysis. They interviewed neighbors who claimed they had always sensed something wrong with the house, though none of them had said anything before. They talked to experts who explained the psychology of serial killers, the methods they use to avoid detection, the way they integrate into communities. But they never mentioned the most disturbing part of the whole thing. The journal entries described not just the murders, but the preparation. The contractor had lived in each house before the crimes, sometimes for weeks, learning the routines, understanding the vulnerabilities, becoming part of the environment. He had slept in the same rooms, used the same bathroom, eaten at the same table as his eventual victims. And according to the dates in the journal, he had lived in my house for 3 months before I bought it. He had walked these hallways, opened these doors, stood in these rooms. He had planned his next crime from the same bedroom where I now slept, the same kitchen where I now cooked, the same bathroom where I now showered. The detective assured me that the contractor was gone, probably dead, certainly no longer a threat. But my dog still growls at things I can't see, still refuses to enter certain rooms. And sometimes when the house is quiet and the shadows are long, I hear sounds that don't belong, footsteps in empty hallways, doors closing in rooms where no one should be. The case is officially closed, the evidence cataloged, the investigation complete. But I know there are more houses, more families, more secrets hidden behind fresh paint and new wallpaper. The contractor was careful, methodical, professional. He wouldn't have stopped with just a few victims. He would have continued, evolved, perfected his methods. And somewhere in a house that looks just like mine, someone is sleeping in a room where a killer once planned his next murder, unaware that their home is not just a shelter, but a carefully prepared trap. Story 10. The motel stood decrepit, a relic of forgotten days where transient souls sought brief respite. The receptionist's gaze held a hint of warning as he handed her the key. Just avoid the last door on the left, his voice barely above a whisper. Intrigue tugged at her, beckoning her towards that forbidden threshold. That night, shrouded in shadows, she hesitated before the ominous door. The handle chilled her fingertips, and as she leaned closer, she heard a faint, rhythmic breath from within. Detective Morgan Reed, weary eyes scanning the scene, ventured into the room marked by yellow tape. The air was heavy with the metallic tang of blood, staining the carpet like a dark secret. Amidst the stark contrasts of order and chaos, a young woman lay lifeless, a tragic figure amidst the sterile surroundings. Reed knelt beside her, absorbing the grim details, knowing this was not a random act of violence. The forensic technician's voice cut through the silence, confirming the grim familiarity of the killer's handiwork. Another puzzle piece in a macabre pattern. The victim's elegance clashed with the motel's squalor, a stark reminder of the darkness that lurked in plain sight. The motel manager, haunted by the tragedy, shared what little he knew, his voice trembling with disbelief. Reed absorbed the information, piecing together a portrait of a victim unknowingly lured into a deadly trap. Back at the precinct, Reed stared at the wall of photos, the faces of the fallen women haunting her. The pieces of the puzzle refused to fit neatly, the whispers of a predator on everyone's lips. The autopsy report revealed the intimate brutality of the crime, pointing towards a personal vendetta rather than a random act of violence. Days turned into nights, the investigation weaving through dead ends and false leads. Surveillance footage offered no solace, leaving more questions than answers. Elaine Werner's life remained a mystery, her death a cruel enigma. A breakthrough emerged from a conversation with her sister, unraveling a web of secrets and lies. The shadow of a man named C loomed large, a forbidden connection that led Reed down a treacherous path. Charles Emerson, a man of stature and deceit, presented a facade of innocence that crumbled under scrutiny. His lies unraveled like a thread pulled too taut, revealing a tapestry of deception and betrayal. The evidence mounted against him, painting a damning portrait of a man driven by fear and desperation. In the interrogation room, Emerson's veneer cracked, exposing the darkness that consumed him. The trial laid bare his sins, the courtroom a stage for justice to play out. Reed's gaze locked with his, a fleeting glimpse into a void where empathy should reside. The door on the left, case closed, but its echoes lingered in Reed's mind, a reminder of the darkness that dwells within the human heart. The keys to those forbidden rooms remain locked away, silent witnesses to the horrors that can never be erased. Story 11. The calf had been his sanctuary for as long as anyone could remember, his presence a comforting constant amidst the ebb and flow of daily life. Each day, he would occupy the same table, place the same order, and envelop himself in the same cocoon of solitude. The barista recognized his face, a silent acknowledgement of his unwavering presence, yet his name remained a mystery to all. Then one fateful day, he failed to materialize. Concern grew like a shadow creeping across the room, culminating in a chilling discovery. Left behind in his customary seat was a wallet, a lone sentinel guarding his enigmatic absence. Within its confines lay a driver's license bearing a face without a name, an identity erased, leaving only a haunting void in its wake. Upon scrutinizing the security footage, Detective Sarah Mercer found herself ensnared in a web of inexplicable events. The figure known only as John Doe appeared ordinary on screen, unremarkable in stature, nondescript in appearance, clad in a navy coat and toting a weathered messenger bag. Yet his vanishing act defied all logic, leaving a trail of disquiet in its wake. With a furrowed brow, Mercer replayed the footage, each frame a piece of a puzzle with no discernible solution. John's routine unfolded as usual, entry during the morning bustle, a simple order of black coffee, and a retreat to a secluded corner table. But then came the moment of transience. He rose from his seat, left his wallet behind, and embarked on a journey to the restroom corridor, a journey from which he never returned, an enigma unsolved. "Inspect the restroom footage," Mercer urged, grasping for a thread of understanding. "There lies the enigma," the specialist replied. "No record of his presence, no trace of his passage. It is as though he dissolved into the very air we breathe." Returning to the precinct, Mercer spread the wallet's contents before her, a barren license, nameless credit cards, and an enigmatic business card whispering secrets in faded ink. A call to the printed number yielded only silence, punctuated by the rustle of unseen papers, a cryptic symphony of the unknown. The barista, a silent witness to John's daily ritual, offered scant insight. He was a man of few words, a solitary figure lost in his thoughts. His accent, a mere whisper, hinted at a world beyond our own. Mercer probed further, seeking connections that eluded her grasp, a phantom slipping through her fingers. The notebook, a cryptic manuscript of coded musings, lay open like a door to an alternate reality. Cryptographers grappled with its contents, revealing sketches of otherworldly architecture, blueprints of a realm existing beyond the veil of familiarity. Mercer dispatched her officers to scour the neighborhood, faces aglow with the mystery of a man who danced on the precipice of existence. As the investigation deepened, Mercer's gaze fell upon a peculiar anomaly in the security footage, a flicker of time, a subtle distortion heralding the unseen. Returning to the cafe, she assumed John's mantle, a silent sentinel at his table, where revelations awaited in the shadow of the unknown. An antique mirror, a relic of forgotten lore, beckoned with its whispered secrets. Mercer's touch revealed a warmth within its icy facade, a heartbeat pulsing in synchrony with the enigma before her. The mirror yielded a trove of hidden truths, a cache of wallets, each a vessel of anonymity, a journal inscribed with echoes of a lifetime lost to the void. The entries spoke of temporal tides, of identities adrift in a sea of possibilities. Weston's hand guided Mercer through a labyrinth of uncertainty, where the lines between reality and illusion blurred into a tapestry of the extraordinary. A revelation came in the form of Margaret Keller, a voice from the past weaving a tale of quantum mirrors and parallel realms. Weston, a martyr to his own brilliance, had traversed the boundaries of existence, leaving behind a legacy of shattered perceptions and fractured realities. In the cafe's reflection, Mercer glimpsed the convergence of worlds, the coalescence of past and present in a dance of shadows. John Doe, Daniel Weston, two halves of a fractured whole, bound by threads of fate and folly. As the mirror shattered, the final note fluttered to the ground, a requiem to a life lived in the margins of reality, a warning against the pursuit of forbidden truths. The cafe's doors closed, the building crumbled, and Weston's essence dissolved into the ether, a ghostly whisper in the wind. Mercer, a denizen of the Twilight Realms, embraced Weston's legacy, her pen dancing across pages of enigma, her gaze fixed on the fractured mirror, a gateway to the unknown. In her solitude, she found solace, a kinship with the enigmatic figure who defied the bounds of mortality. And so, the tale of the man who slipped through the cracks of existence remained a mystery unsolved, a riddle without a solution. The cafe's echo lingered in the night, a haunting melody of what once was and what could never be again. Story 12, the vacant house held a silent secret, untouched by time. Whispers among the neighbors spoke of a young woman who vanished, leaving the dwelling to gather dust and shadows. When new occupants ventured inside, they encountered a bedroom locked from within, concealing a mystery waiting to be unraveled. With cautious hands, they breached the barrier, stepping into a realm frozen in solitude. The air hung heavy, carrying the weight of years gone by. Despite the stillness, an unsettling presence lingered, stirring the senses. The room, untouched yet not untouched, revealed peculiar signs of life suspended in time. The bed lay neatly made, the mirror devoid of dust, a lone candle extinguished, its once vigilant flame reduced to tears frozen in wax. Amidst this eerie tableau lay a notebook, its pages filled with the elegant script of a woman named Elise Winters. Her words, penned with precision and purpose, spoke of a chilling truth veiled in shadows. Detective Morgan delved into the enigmatic writings, each stroke of the pen unraveling a tale of deception and danger. Elise, a young paralegal entangled in a web of corporate deceit, had unearthed damning evidence within the hallowed halls of Harriman and Associates. Her meticulous nature had led her down a treacherous path, uncovering discrepancies that threatened to shatter the facade of a prestigious firm. As the investigation deepened, a portrait emerged of a woman on the brink of a revelation, a truth too perilous to ignore. The room bore witness to her final moments, frozen in time like a haunting echo of the past. No traces of struggle tainted the scene, no blood stained the floor, only a lingering sense of foreboding, a silent plea for justice. As the investigation unfolded, hidden truths came to light. A concealed compartment revealed a trove of incriminating documents, shedding light on a conspiracy that reached far beyond the confines of the vacant house. Digital remnants unveiled a sinister plot, a web of deception woven by those entrusted with safeguarding the public trust. Detective Morgan's relentless pursuit of justice unearthed a trail of deceit that led to the doorstep of Vincent Harriman, a man enshrouded in shadows. The evidence, though circumstantial, painted a damning portrait of a man willing to silence the truth at any cost. Through hidden passages and concealed truths, the mystery unraveled, exposing a dark underbelly of corruption and greed. Elise's legacy, etched in ink and blood, became a beacon of truth in a world cloaked in lies. In the end, justice prevailed, casting a light into the shadows of the vacant house. Elise's room, a silent witness to her courage and conviction, stood as a testament to a life cut short but not forgotten. The house, once a sanctuary for secrets, now stood empty, its walls echoing with the whispers of the past. The legacy of Elise Winters lived on, a reminder that even in the darkest of nights, the truth will always find a way to shine through. Story 13, the apartment exuded an ancient air, the heating system emitting low groans, the pipes whispering secrets of the past, nothing out of the ordinary, she assured herself. But then a faint voice, distinct yet distant, floated through the vents, not the usual chatter of neighbors or the hum of appliances. It was a whisper, a calling of her name that sent shivers down her spine. Pressing her ear against the cold metal grate, her heart raced as a breeze of icy air brushed past her cheek, followed by a soft, almost playful declaration, "I know you can hear me." Detective Morgan Shaw stood in silence at the heart of the empty apartment, her gaze fixed on the rusted vent cover pried open from the wall. The forensic team moved with precision around her, capturing the scene with flashing cameras. Alina Reeves, the missing victim, had vanished without a trace for 7 days until a putrid odor alerted the building manager. What they unearthed within the ventilation system defied all logic. Officer Patel, his voice filled with intrigue, recited from his notepad about Alina's reports of voices through the vents, dismissed as mere quirks of an old building by management. Shaw knelt by the vent, noting the deep scratch marks around it, bearing witness to desperate attempts to escape from within. The victim, Alina, a beloved kindergarten teacher with a green thumb and a radiant smile, had a life that seemed untouched by darkness until her disappearance. Her students crafted cards, her sister filed the missing person report, and her paranoia leading up to the vanishing act was chalked up to work stress. Shaw scrutinized the apartment with fresh eyes, observing the carefully made bed, the unwashed coffee mug, and a chair strategically placed under the vent as if awaiting a listener. The forensic report uncovered chilling clues, fibers matching Alina's cardigan, a foreign fingerprint inside the vent cover, and haunting audio recordings on Alina's phone. Alone in her car, rain drumming on the roof, Shaw listened to Alina's trembling voice, followed by a faint whisper that spoke of sinister intentions. Digging deeper, the history of the building unveiled a dark narrative past tenants fleeing, complaints of eerie noises, and a resident plagued by hallucinations of voices in the vents. Harold Weber, the unassuming building superintendent, raised Shaw's suspicions with his evasive answers, hinting at a deeper involvement with the mysteries of apartment 4B. Forensic breakthroughs uncovered a hidden passage in Alina's bathroom, leading to a maintenance tunnel where remnants of a clandestine existence were found. Someone had been dwelling within the walls, watching, whispering. Shaw's team uncovered Weber's meticulously organized recordings, photos, and a digital journal documenting his twisted obsession with Alina. The evidence stacked against Weber was damning, culminating in his arrest as he smiled serenely, claiming that the building spoke through him. The truth of Alina's demise came to light sedated, coerced into the ventilation system, lost in a labyrinth of ducts as she chased the false promises whispered to her. Families of past tenants recounted unsettling experiences, missing mementos, and loved ones driven to paranoia by unseen forces. Weber's trial painted a picture of a calculating predator, a ghost in the walls orchestrating a macabre symphony of fear and manipulation. Convicted on all charges, Weber's parting words to Shaw echoed of a chilling legacy, a reminder that the whispers of the past never truly fade. The apartment building, now a ghostly relic, remains haunted by the echoes of its dark history. Residents come and go, plagued by strange sounds from the vents, whispers in the walls, and icy drafts carrying voices that refuse to be silenced. The building's groans and rattles continue, a symphony of secrets that no amount of renovation can erase. Story 14. In the attic's depths, under a worn blanket, they discovered it. A porcelain doll, ancient and fragile, with eyes of painted blue that seemed to stare into eternity. Sarah and Michael, a young couple with dreams woven into the fabric of their new Victorian home, brushed off the doll's uncanny presence as nothing more than a forgotten relic of the past. Yet that night, a subtle unease lingered in the air, casting shadows where there should have been none. The stillness of the house felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken secrets. Morning light revealed a chilling truth: the doll was no longer nestled in the attic's embrace. Instead, it sat serenely at the foot of their bed, a silent sentinel in the dim dawn. Sarah and Michael, unsuspecting souls drawn into a web of mystery, had unwittingly invited the unknown into their lives. Detective Rachel Winters, a seeker of truths that eluded the light of day, was summoned on an autumn morning crisp with foreboding. The scene she encountered spoke of a macabre tale: two figures, one posed in a grotesque imitation of life, the other frozen in a futile attempt to flee. The room bore no signs of intrusion, no traces of a struggle save for the silent screams etched on the victims' faces. The artistry of death, Detective Winters murmured, her voice a whisper in the stillness as she catalogued the scene's grim details. The puzzle before her defied logic, a tapestry woven with threads of fear and uncertainty. Interviews with the neighbors unveiled whispers of shadows dancing behind curtains, of phantom laughter echoing through the night. Each tale added a layer to the growing tapestry of dread that enveloped the house, shrouding it in a cloak of whispers and half-truths. Forensic findings painted a haunting picture: traces of antique fabrics, imprints of invisible hands, a residue of porcelain dust mingled with the essence of the unknown. The past, it seemed, had woven its tendrils into the very walls of the house, binding the present to a history steeped in darkness. As Detective Winters delved deeper, she unearthed a legacy of tragedy: a dollmaker haunted by loss, a daughter taken by shadows. The final creation of the dollmaker, a doll imbued with the essence of a lost child, emerged as a harbinger of doom, its presence a specter of the past seeking retribution. The house's history whispered of lives intertwined with the supernatural, of souls bound to objects by arcane rituals. The doll, a vessel for restless spirits, held the key to a mystery that defied the boundaries of reason. And then a revelation: a distant relative's cryptic words hinting at secrets buried deep within the dollmaker's legacy. The line between the living and the dead blurred, as whispers of forbidden knowledge echoed through the halls of time. The case, a riddle without a solution, lingered in the shadows of the unsolved. Detective Winters, her resolve tested by forces beyond her comprehension, found herself ensnared in a web of enigmas that defied all logical explanation. The doll, a phantom in porcelain guise, vanished into the night, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a legacy of unspoken horrors. The house, a silent witness to the mysteries of the past, passed into new hands, its secrets buried beneath layers of dust and forgotten lore. And so the tale of Sarah and Michael, entwined with the whispers of a haunted past, faded into the realm of legend, a cautionary tale whispered in the dark of night. The dollmaker's legacy, a chapter closed yet never truly concluded, lingered in the shadows, a reminder of the thin veil that separates the living from the dead. In the stillness of the night, a faint echo of laughter drifted through the house, carrying with it the ghostly touch of a child's hand. And as the moon cast its gentle light upon the attic window, a small shadow danced in the darkness, a silent sentinel watching over the house's slumbering secrets. Story 15. The wooden plank shifted beneath her weight, a subtle movement that caught her attention. Slowly she knelt down, her fingers tracing the edges of the loosened board. It was as if the floor itself was whispering secrets, beckoning her to uncover its hidden truths. With careful determination, she pried up the boards, unveiling a dark, mysterious space beneath the house. At first, all she saw was dust dancing in the dim light and cobwebs clinging to the shadows. But as her eyes adjusted to the darkness, shapes began to emerge: a mattress, a chair, and in the corner, a weathered notebook filled with pages upon pages of a single name, her name repeated endlessly. Detective Morgan Reed stood quietly behind Sarah Coleman, her presence a grounding force as Sarah peered into the abyss beneath her newfound sanctuary. The fear in Sarah's eyes spoke volumes, a primal instinct warning her of the sinister intrusion that lay hidden beneath her very feet. "Don't disturb anything," Detective Reed's voice was steady, a calm amidst the storm of unsettling discoveries. She flicked on her flashlight, casting a revealing beam into the concealed space, illuminating walls adorned with photographed snapshots of Sarah in her most vulnerable moments, captured without her knowledge. Sarah had bought the quaint cottage from the late Walter Green's estate, a solitary man who had passed away with no known kin. The property had stood vacant for months, its history shrouded in silence. The listing had painted a picture of charm and potential, omitting any mention of the chilling secret that lay buried beneath its floorboards. "I never met him," the previous owner, Sarah's voice was a fragile whisper. The neighbors said he was a recluse. The basement was supposed to be sealed off long ago. That's what the records said. As crime scene investigators entered the hidden chamber, their footsteps echoing against the wooden floors, a meticulous process unfolded. Every detail was documented, every piece of evidence catalogued, as the mattress, chair, and notebook were carefully extracted from their clandestine resting place. Forensic analysis later revealed a haunting truth: Walter Green's fingerprints blanketed the hidden chamber, a testament to his unseen presence in Sarah's life. The timeline that emerged from the investigation was a chilling revelation. Walter had been watching Sarah for years, blending into the backdrop of her existence with eerie precision. He had orbited her world unseen and unnoticed, his fixation escalating with each passing day. This level of fixation often leads to action, the department psychologist explained somberly. The hidden room suggests a disturbing level of intent. Detective Reed's inquiries took a surprising turn when she interviewed Walter's former co-worker, a hesitant man who revealed fragments of a dark obsession. He spoke of her, the co-worker confessed, his gaze haunted. Said she was meant for him. "I thought it was harmless, just the ramblings of an old man." But the pieces of the puzzle were slowly falling into place, painting a portrait of obsession that transcended mere infatuation. A key found in Walter's long-forgotten locker led the investigators to a storage unit, a chamber frozen in time, a mirror image of Sarah's former life. Every detail meticulously recreated, every corner a shrine to a twisted fantasy. The calendar marked with a foreboding date, a silent promise of a future that would never come to pass. Walter's troubled past, marked by a history of delusion and fixation, cast a shadow over the investigation. His obsession with Sarah was a culmination of a lifetime of unchecked desires, a tragedy waiting to unfold. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, a sense of unease settled over the investigators, a reminder of the fragility of sanity, the depths of human darkness. Sarah made the difficult decision to part ways with the house, a sanctuary tainted by Walter's unseen presence. As she stood in the empty living room, memories of what could have been lingered in the air. The case was closed, the chapter of stalking and obsession officially sealed, but the echoes of Walter's legacy lingered on. Life moved forward, the cottage finding new owners who knew nothing of its hidden past. The secret chamber was sealed off, its mysteries buried once more beneath the veil of normalcy. But for those who knew the truth, the story of the hidden room beneath the floorboards remained a cautionary tale, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk within the most ordinary of places, of the thin line between safety and peril, between reality and the chilling unknown. Story 16. The quaint costume emporium was on the brink of closure, its shelves bare as it liquidated its ancient wares. In the dwindling light of the day, a woman sifted through the remnants, her fingers brushing over forgotten treasures. Among the forgotten relics, her hand alighted on a mask nestled in a shadowed corner. Its delicate features held a strange allure, almost too lifelike in their unsettling perfection. The woman brought it to the counter, where the cashier hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "That's not ours," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Perplexed, she sought a tag, but none adorned the mask. With a nonchalant shrug, she decided to claim it as her own and carried it away to her abode. As night draped its velvet cloak over the world, a soft, rustling sound roused the woman from slumber. A whisper of fabric shifting, barely perceptible. Her heart quickened as she scanned the room, her eyes settling on the nightstand. There, bathed in moonlight, sat the mask she had acquired, its gaze fixed upon her like an unyielding sentinel. The woman known as Catherine Reed would later be discovered by a concerned neighbor. The morning light spilled into her home through the slightly ajar door, illuminating a scene that would perplex investigators for years to come. Detective Morgan arrived at the somber tableau as forensics meticulously documented every detail. The rhythmic click of shutters punctuated the hushed murmurs of the onlookers. No signs of forced entry, an officer remarked, jotting down observations in a notebook. The detective's keen eyes swept the room, absorbing minute details that whispered of a story untold. A half-open drawer, a lipstick-stained water glass, a facade of normalcy shattered by the stillness of a life extinguished. The medical examiner, with a solemn countenance, knelt by the motionless form of Catherine. Initial examination reveals no obvious cause of death. No marks of violence, no signs of resistance, he intoned, drawing attention to the frozen mask of terror etched on her features. The detective, her voice barely a murmur, voiced the chilling realization. Something frightened her beyond words. Catherine, an unassuming art appraiser by day, had been known for her discerning eye and unwavering dedication to authenticity. Colleagues spoke of her ability to discern the genuine from the counterfeit with a mere glance. She had a knack for spotting the subtle discrepancies, her employer recalled during questioning. The detective pondered whether this keen perception had unwittingly led to Catherine's demise. Security footage from the now desolate costume shop unveiled a perplexing encounter. The cashier's confusion mirrored the woman's own at the sight of the enigmatic mask. Summoning the store's owner, he sought clarity, only to be met with a firm denial. Lip-reading experts deciphered the owner's silent declaration, "We never stocked such an item." A visit to the emptied shop unearthed a tale of eerie origins. The owner, racked with unease, divulged that the mask had materialized during a clearance sale, its provenance a mystery lost to time. "It was not part of our inventory," he confessed, his voice tinged with trepidation. Pressed further, he reluctantly disclosed unsettling tidbits about items acquired from a deceased collector with a shadowy past. A breakthrough materialized with the discovery of microscopic fibers embedded in Catherine's grasp. She was clutching onto something, the forensic analyst elucidated. "These fibers are of an unusual composition, part human hair, part unidentified organic matter defying classification." The trail of investigation led to a series of inexplicable deaths spanning decades, each victim acquiring a sinister mask before meeting their untimely end. A retired detective, a veteran of one such case, shared a clandestine meeting with the current investigator. In a dimly lit room, he passed a weathered file across the table, revealing a shocking revelation. Inside each mask, hidden behind the lining, we found ancient symbols, he divulged. A scholar posited a connection to a ritual entailing soul transference. The mystery deepened with the unearthing of a journal secreted within Catherine's residence, concealed behind a loose panel. Her final entry chronicled a descent into paranoia, a sense of being monitored within her own sanctuary. She delved into the mask's murky past, drawing links to a macabre series of inexplicable deaths. "The mask moves," her frantic script spelled out. "It watches me, its inscriptions mirroring those of past victims." The collector who owned these cursed visages met a similar fate. Each mask claims a life before seeking a new vessel. The entity hungers for a host, perpetuating a cycle that spans centuries. The detective pieced together the puzzle Catherine's research, the enigmatic fibers, the recurring pattern of fear-stricken demises. The medical examiner's grim diagnosis unveiled the ultimate truth. Catherine succumbed to cardiac arrest induced by sheer terror. The investigation took a harrowing turn with the unearthing of surveillance footage from a vigilant neighbor's abode. A spectral figure, garbed in the macabre mask, emerged from Catherine's dwelling under the shroud of darkness. Its movements mimicked Catherine's gait, a twisted imitation devoid of humanity, akin to a marionette manipulated by unseen hands. An alert for the missing mask was issued, but it eluded capture, resurfacing months later in a distant vintage emporium. By then it had changed hands, its new possessor shrouded in anonymity. The enigma persisted, the case relegated to the realm of unsolved mysteries. The detective safeguarded Catherine's journal, a silent testament to a truth too bizarre for official records. In the stillness of night, she would startle awake, a sensation of being observed sending shivers down her spine. She would secure her abode, fortifying its defenses against an unseen malevolence, a specter of dread lingering in the shadows. The mask, a harbinger of doom, awaited its next unwitting victim. Its hollow gaze, devoid of compassion, hungered for the essence that dwelt behind mortal eyes. And so the cycle endured, a macabre dance of death that commenced eons ago and persisted into eternity. The mask bided its time, patient and insatiable, yearning to ensnare another soul in its web of terror. Story 17. In the midst of an ordinary day, a peculiar package arrived in the mail, shrouded in mystery. A plain envelope devoid of a return address revealed a single brass key, weathered and aged with time. The homeowner, Sarah Miller, felt a strange sense of familiarity with the key, yet she couldn't place its origin. Intrigued, she attempted to use it on every lock within her home, but to no avail. The key refused to turn, indicating it did not belong to her. Perplexed, Sarah set the brass key down on her coffee table, and to her astonishment, the old grandfather clock in the hallway emitted a solitary, haunting chime, a sound that hadn't graced the home in years, for the clock had long been broken. Sensing an unsettling presence, Sarah decided to report the bizarre incident to the authorities. Initially met with skepticism, the responding officer brushed off Sarah's concerns as a simple mix-up in the mail. However, Sarah's intuition told her otherwise. Reluctantly, the officer accepted the key as evidence, placing it in a small evidence bag that would later become the focal point of an intricate investigation. Enter Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator from the Special Victims Unit, renowned for his ability to discern cases that transcended their seemingly innocuous beginnings. As he examined the unassuming brass key on his desk, an inexplicable unease settled upon him. Delving into Sarah's background, investigators found no hint of criminal activity. She was a retired high school English teacher, widowed, with children living afar. Financial records, phone logs, and social media offered no clues to suggest Sarah's involvement in anything untoward. She appeared to be an unwitting recipient of a strange occurrence. Forensic analysis of the key revealed only Sarah's fingerprints, and the envelope bore no significant evidence apart from a generic postmark. The key, a standard Schlage, showed signs of wear, hinting at years of use. The breakthrough in the case came unexpectedly when Detective Harmon decided to cross-reference the key's unique bidding pattern with the department's database. A chilling connection emerged, a cold case dating back 7 years, linked to a storage unit where gruesome evidence had been uncovered, including blood-stained carpet, tools, and photographs of unidentified women. The original investigation had hit a dead end due to lack of evidence. Dusting off the old case files, Harmon unearthed a trail of darkness. The key to the storage unit had been assigned to a false identity, paid for in cash, with surveillance footage long erased. Partial DNA samples had yielded no matches, leaving the case unsolved. As Sarah Miller found herself embroiled in an escalating nightmare, she fortified her home with new locks and a security system, grappling with the unanswered question, why her? A breakthrough finally emerged when modern techniques expanded the partial DNA sample, leading to a distant familial match, a revelation that pointed to Harold Jenkins, a former neighbor of Sarah's who had vanished years prior. Jenkins, a man with a shadowy past, had once roamed the same streets as Sarah, leaving behind a trail of unexplained gaps and relocations. The search intensified as investigators uncovered a hidden room beneath a cabin registered to Jenkins' deceased mother. Inside, rows of brass keys with engraved tags revealed a harrowing truth: identities of victims previously unknown to law enforcement. Human remains unearthed behind the cabin painted a grim picture of unspeakable horrors. As the manhunt for Jenkins expanded nationwide, the community shuddered at the realization of a predator lurking among them. Behavioral analysts speculated on Jenkins' motives, branding him the keymaster in the media. The hunt culminated in a tense standoff where Jenkins, cornered by law enforcement, chose to end his own life rather than face justice. His journal, a chilling testament to his crimes, addressed Sarah directly, revealing a twisted obsession with her. In the aftermath, 32 victims were identified, offering closure to families haunted by unanswered questions. Sarah, forever changed by the ordeal, could never return to her once ordinary life, forever haunted by the darkness that had brushed so close to her. The grandfather clock, a silent witness to the unfolding tragedy, concealed a wireless receiver, a tool Jenkins had used to watch and wait for his moment to strike. The collection of brass keys, now silent in an evidence locker, stood as a grim reminder of lives lost and the insidious evil that can lurk behind a facade of normalcy. The case of Harold Jenkins, the keymaster, remains a chilling testament to the depths of human depravity, urging psychologists and law enforcement to delve deeper into the minds of such predators in a quest to prevent future tragedies before they unfold. And in the quiet of the night, the echoes of Sarah's ordeal linger, a cautionary tale of the darkness that can lurk just beneath the surface of everyday life. Story 18: The Enigmatic Dollhouse. She always avoided the attic, finding it unsettling, but when a storm brought a leak in the roof, she had no choice but to venture up there. The attic was a place of forgotten treasures, covered in dust and cobwebs. Tucked away in the shadows, she noticed an old dollhouse, meticulously detailed with tiny furniture arranged perfectly. However, as she peered closer, a sense of unease crept over her. The figures inside were not ordinary dolls, they were miniature, intricately carved replicas of her own family. Each figure placed exactly as they sat downstairs, except for one. The figure meant to be her was standing near the attic door. Rebecca Morgan gently ran her finger over the dollhouse roof, feeling the spot where the small wooden figure stood. A chill ran down her spine, unrelated to the cold draft whispering through the attic. This dollhouse should not have been there at all. This wasn't her childhood home. It was a rental property her family had recently moved into. The unsettling discovery led Rebecca to make a frantic call to the authorities. Police officers arrived at the suburban house to find a family in distress, refusing to return to the attic. Detective Sarah Harmon, the lead investigator, initially brushed off their concerns as a possible prank or the result of adjusting to a new home. What caught Detective Harmon's attention was the meticulous detail of the miniature figurines. Each tiny replica captured unique features of the family members: the father's thinning hair, the teenage son's favorite hoodie, even the small birthmark on the mother's hand. The investigation took a dark turn when forensic teams found fingerprints on the dollhouse that did not match anyone in the family. Further analysis revealed microscopic cameras hidden in the eyes of each miniature figure, all connected to a sophisticated recording system beneath the dollhouse. Reviewing the Morgan family's movements showed a disturbing pattern. The positions of the figures didn't just mirror where the family had been sitting that evening. They matched exact positions from different days, indicating someone had been observing them closely to learn their routines. It was clear this was not a mere case of stalking, Detective Harmon explained. The level of obsession displayed by the perpetrator was unprecedented in criminal psychology. A breakthrough came when investigators discovered a concealed basement entrance behind a false wall in the pantry. Inside, they found evidence of someone living there before the Morgans moved in, with food wrappers, water bottles, and a sleeping bag hinting at a long-term residency. The absence of forced entry perplexed investigators. Property records revealed the house had been empty for a year before the Morgans arrived. Interviews with neighbors provided little insight, except for one elderly woman who occasionally noticed lights in the vacant house. Digital forensics eventually led investigators to a small apartment across town. Inside, they uncovered a trove of photographs of the Morgan family and other previous occupants of the house. Journal entries meticulously detailed the daily lives of each family member. The most chilling discovery was a workshop filled with partially completed dollhouses, each representing different homes in the neighborhood. The apartment belonged to Martin Wells, the son of the previous homeowners. Financial records showed his mounting debt after his parents' passing. Instead of selling the house, he had covertly lived there while leasing it to unsuspecting tenants. The dollhouses served as Wells' control center, each figure representing someone he observed closely. The figure of Rebecca by the attic door wasn't a threat. It was his way of acknowledging her discovery of his surveillance. During interrogation, Wells remained eerily composed, explaining that he needed to ensure the occupants respected his childhood home. The positioned figures were his way of letting them know he was always watching. Psychological evaluations revealed Wells suffered from possessive delusions, unable to cope with losing his family home. The dollhouse became a tool for him to exert control over both the property and its inhabitants. The Morgan family never returned to the house, haunted by the realization that they had been under constant surveillance, manipulated like puppets in a twisted game. Wells faced charges of stalking, invasion of privacy, illegal surveillance, and breaking and entering. The case sparked a review of real estate disclosure laws regarding property histories and the responsibility of agents to ensure homes are properly vacated before new tenants move in. The judge, during sentencing, acknowledged the profound violation the Morgan family endured. Wells didn't just invade their home, he invaded their sense of security and autonomy, turning their private moments into a spectacle for his amusement. Criminologists were disturbed by how long Wells could have continued unnoticed if not for Rebecca's discovery of the dollhouse. His journals indicated he had been secretly living in homes for years, creating dollhouses for each family he observed. The Morgan family relocated far away, but Rebecca admitted she still felt a lingering sense of being watched. She removed all dollhouses and miniatures from their new home, fearing that somewhere, someone might still be manipulating a tiny version of her in a dollhouse yet to be found. Story 19. In the quiet of the morning, a mysterious package appeared on Sarah Miller's doorstep. No return address, no tracking number, just a humble cardboard box kissed by the morning dew. It wasn't meant for her. The name on it was Foreign Daniel Whitaker. Her instincts whispered for her to ignore it, to leave it be. But curiosity, that ever-persistent companion, won the battle. With a gentle tug, the tape was unsealed, revealing not books or clothes, but a lone VHS tape and a cryptic note that simply said, "Watch alone." Sarah's fingers hesitated as they held the weight of the forbidden tape. It felt heavier than it should, as if carrying secrets too heavy for its plastic casing. The suburban backdrop hummed with its usual rhythms: a distant dog's bark, children's laughter, the rhythmic melody of a lawnmower. Oblivious to the enigma that had just crossed her threshold, Sarah brought the package inside, setting it on her kitchen counter. The name Daniel Whitaker meant nothing to her. The previous owners, the Johnsons, had vacated the house years ago. Curiosity intertwined with unease as she eyed her old VCR, a relic of days gone by. Something about the tape beckoned her, a mystery veiled in black plastic. Against her better judgment, she pressed play. The screen crackled to life with static, gradually sharpening into focus. A dimly lit room emerged, casting shadows that danced on the walls. A man sat before her, his features obscured by darkness. "My name is Daniel Whitaker." His voice, quiet yet resolute, filled the room. "If you're watching this, someone found you, which means they'll find me too." As he leaned forward, the shadows retreated, revealing a face weathered by fear and resolve. "I didn't kill her, I need you to know that, but they found my fingerprints, my DNA, even though I never touched her." The camera panned, revealing the stark emptiness of his surroundings, a temporary sanctuary for a man on the run. "They planted everything," his voice wavered with emotion. "The police report will paint me as the culprit, but it's all a lie. I never knew Catherine Walsh until her face haunted the news, lifeless." Detective Eliza Ramirez found herself entangled in a web of deceit as she uncovered 5 identical tapes bearing Whitaker's plea. The manhunt for him intensified, yet the truth remained elusive. The Walsh case, once clear-cut, now danced on shifting sands. Catherine's involvement in a whistleblower case against PharmaCorp, a pharmaceutical giant, shed light on darker truths. Evidence hinted at a cover-up, at powerful forces manipulating the narrative to shield their sins. Sarah Miller's world tilted when a second package arrived, laden with incriminating documents that painted a damning picture of PharmaCorp's corruption. As Detective Ramirez unraveled the threads connecting the recipients of the tapes, a narrative of conspiracy and betrayal emerged. Whitaker's journey from IT security to fugitive unfolded, his innocence a beacon in a sea of lies. Sarah's keen eye caught a crucial detail in the tape, a reflection that led them to a storage unit brimming with damning evidence. Justice, slow but inexorable, descended on the perpetrators, toppling the pillars of deceit that had shielded them. As Whitaker emerged from the shadows, vindicated but scarred, Sarah confronted him with the question that had lingered in her mind. "Why me? Why send it to my address?" His response, laden with weariness, spoke of algorithms and chance, of trusting in the unassuming to see beyond the fabricated truth. In the quiet of her porch, Sarah and Whitaker stood, 2 souls touched by the hand of fate. The wrong address, it seemed, had led them to the right path. The VHS tapes, now lodged in evidence, whispered a tale of how truth, in its purest form, arrives in unexpected guises, waiting for the curious and the brave to unveil its mysteries. Story 20. The ancient box lay hidden beneath layers of forgotten treasures in the attic, a time-worn relic left behind by the house's previous inhabitants. Within its depths resided faded Polaroids, capturing moments of joy and celebration, birthdays, family gatherings, the usual, harmless, mundane, until she stumbled upon the final picture. In that photograph, taken within the familiar confines of her living room, on the same old couch, surrounded by the same drapes, sat a family she did not recognize. And looming in the background, barely discernible in the dimness, stood a man in the hallway watching. Rebecca felt a shiver slither up her spine as she scrutinized the image. Her fingers quivered slightly, causing the edges of the photograph to flutter. The family in the picture, a woman with sun-kissed locks, a man with thick-rimmed glasses, and two children beamed at the camera, oblivious to the menacing presence lingering in the shadows behind them, frozen in a snapshot of happiness while peril lurked just footsteps away. Descending the creaking wooden stairs, Rebecca carried the photo to her kitchen, where she laid it upon the counter, studying it beneath the harsh glare of the fluorescent lights. The resemblance was uncanny, the archway leading to the hallway, the distinctive molding, the bay window drenched in morning light. This was her dwelling, yet these faces were strangers. The arrival of Detective Morgan brought a sense of urgency to the eerie discovery. Clad in a worn leather jacket that whispered of past investigations, his eyes delved deep into the photograph, scouring it with meticulous scrutiny. Tracing a gloved finger along the Polaroid's edge, he turned it over, revealing a blank back. "What do you know about the previous owners, the Nelsons?" His voice rumbled low, probing for answers. "Next to nothing," Rebecca confessed. The sale was handled through a real estate agent. They had already relocated out of state. Nodding thoughtfully, Morgan's inscrutable expression gave away nothing. "May I borrow this? Our team might be able to identify the family in the photo." And so the investigation commenced quietly. Through diligent inquiries, Rebecca uncovered that the Nelsons had acquired the house from the Crawfords, who had resided there for 7 years before vanishing abruptly. Prior to them, the Mornos had called the property home for nearly a decade. Detective Morgan meticulously traced the lineage of past occupants, consulting property records and interviewing former neighbors to construct a timeline of residents. The breakthrough arrived unexpectedly. A former mail carrier, upon glimpsing the photograph, identified the family without hesitation. "That's the Sutherlands," he asserted. "They occupied that house for just a year before they disappeared without a trace. Mail piled up unclaimed until it was eventually returned. It was assumed they had relocated without informing anyone." The Sutherlands, 4 souls gone without a trace. No forwarding address. No evidence of the children enrolling in new schools. Their vehicles never recovered. Bank accounts left untouched, as if they had evaporated into thin air. Forensic analysis pinpointed the Polaroid's age to roughly 15 years prior. The technician highlighted subtle nuances within the picture, the peculiar pattern of dust particles suspended in the air, the eerie stillness of the subjects. "This was a timed shot," she elucidated. "Notice how each person is perfectly positioned. Someone had to set up the camera and then rush into place." But if the Sutherlands had arranged the photo themselves, who was the enigmatic figure in the hallway? Enhanced imaging disclosed further details about the shadowy figure. Towering, masculine, clad in dark attire. His countenance obscured, yet his stance exuded a palpable intensity. He stood motionless, as though he belonged there, as though he held every right to inhabit that space. Detective Morgan uncovered a disquieting pattern. Preceding the Sutherlands, another family had dwelled in the residence for precisely a year before disappearing, and before them another. 5 families over a span of 5 years, all evaporating inexplicably, always after a year of residency. Having resided in the house for 4 months herself, Rebecca found herself entangled in a web of mysteries rooted in the building's history. Unearthing archival records revealed that the house had been erected by a distinguished architect of impeccable renown, yet the overseer had vanished near the project's culmination. A man named Samuel Whitfield had stepped in to complete the construction. Police archives yielded a solitary photograph of Whitfield, a tall, gaunt man with hollow cheeks and piercing eyes. When digitally aged and juxtaposed with the figure in the Polaroid, the resemblance was striking. However, reports indicated that Samuel Whitfield had purportedly perished in an accident at another construction site shortly after finishing the house. His remains were never recovered from the wreckage of the collapsed foundation. The investigation zeroed in on the basement. Employing ground-penetrating radar, anomalies beneath the concrete flooring were detected, incongruities in density that defied explanation. As jackhammers breached the surface, a pungent odor wafted forth. Buried beneath layers of concrete and earth they lay, not merely the Sutherlands, but all the missing families, intact, preserved in the cool, arid soil. Alongside their possessions lay a camera, the very camera that had captured the Polaroid concealed in the attic, and an array of other photographs, each depicting a different family, blissfully ignorant of the figure lurking in the shadows. The house was cordoned off as a crime scene. Rebecca would never return. As investigators meticulously cataloged evidence, a hidden crawlspace in the attic, concealed behind a false partition, was uncovered. Within lay a cot, photographic equipment, and a journal brimming with meticulous observations of the previous inhabitants. The final entry, dated a mere 3 days prior, read, "The new one is unlike the rest. She discovered my photograph too soon. I must hasten my plans." Relocated to a hotel under the shield of police protection, Rebecca was roused from fitful slumber one night by a ringing phone. Answering, she was met with only the sound of breath, then a click, succeeded by the mechanical whir of a Polaroid camera spitting out a photo. The investigation persists to this day. The house stands vacant, its windows shrouded in darkness, its enigmas not fully unveiled. The whereabouts of Samuel Whitfield, if that was his authentic identity, remain elusive. Some conjecture that he perished long ago, while others posit that he simply migrated to a fresh locale under a new guise within a new abode. And somewhere within a dim chamber, photographs are materializing new families, new residences, new watchers in the shadows. The sole certainty is that those who pursue the truth behind the man in the photograph are now being observed in turn. Story 21: The Enigmatic Manor. The new occupants of the Grand Victorian Manor brushed off the peculiar crackling of the old intercom system as a mere quirk of the past, a relic rewired but forgotten. Late one night, curiosity got the best of the husband, prompting him to press the button. A faint whisper crackled through the speaker, sending shivers down his spine. "Why did you come back?" The words hung in the air, unsettling in their mystery. His wife, standing close behind him, denied ever uttering those haunting words. The manor, embraced by ancient oak trees, bore a weathered facade that concealed a modern interior renovated by the new owners, Daniel and Meredith Parker. Despite acquiring the property at a surprisingly low price, the couple's excitement was tinged with an unspoken unease lingering from the real estate agent's anxious demeanor during the initial tour. The vintage intercom system, linking all rooms, had charmed the Parkers, both avid lovers of history. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at the manor, her unmarked vehicle stirring gravel under its tires. Initially dispatched for a suspected break-in, the dispatcher's tone hinted at a deeper narrative. Daniel, his complexion pale in the dim porch light, welcomed Detective Reeves, leading her through the elaborate foyer as he recounted the eerie events unfurling within their home. It all began with the intercom, Daniel disclosed, his voice tinged with apprehension. First static, then whispers, and eventually coherent sentences. Even my wife heard it, confirming I wasn't imagining things. In the living room, Meredith sat stiffly on an antique sofa, her hands tightly clasped around an untouched steaming mug. Without preamble, she divulged the shocking discovery made behind a wall that Daniel had begun to dismantle for kitchen expansion. "We found something hidden there," Meredith revealed, her voice trembling. As Daniel tore down the drywall, her words trailed off, the weight of the revelation heavy in the room. Wrapped in decaying plastic, a small leather-bound journal emerged, its brittle pages holding the elegant yet frantic script of its author, Elinor, the previous resident. Elinor's entries unveiled her growing fear of her husband, Vincent, and his malevolent intentions towards her. Daniel clarified that the last journal entry dated back 30 years, leaving a void thereafter. The previous owners had acquired the manor from an elderly man who had relocated to a retirement community. The ensuing investigation pieced together the lives of Vincent and Elinor Blackwood, the former owners of the property. Records indicated Vincent's prompt sale of the manor following Elinor's alleged departure, with no trace of divorce proceedings, change of address, or financial activities in Elinor's name post the final journal entry. Detective Reeves mobilized a team to scrutinize the property thoroughly, unearthing anomalies beneath the garden shed's concrete foundation with ground-penetrating radar. As the aged concrete gave way, the chilling truth surfaced in the form of human remains. Forensic analysis identified the skeleton as a woman in her 40s, bearing signs of fatal head trauma. Among the remains lay a gold wedding band engraved with the tender dedication, "To Elinor, my eternal love." The mounting evidence against Vincent Blackwood, now elderly and residing in a care facility, painted a grim picture. When confronted, his chillingly composed admission sent shivers down even Detective Reeves' spine. "She wouldn't cease her chatter," Vincent confessed, his voice unsettlingly serene. "Through that cursed intercom, she incessantly probed and questioned. I disconnected it, but she rewired it herself, insisting on maintaining a connection no matter where I roamed in the house." His vacant gaze searched the distance. I craved silence. In his confession, Vincent unveiled the elaborate scheme he orchestrated to fabricate Elinor's abandonment, forging postcards from various locales in her name. For years, he dwelt in the manor, treading daily over the very spot concealing his wife's remains. The trial swiftly concluded with Vincent's guilty plea for murder. The judge, noting the calculated nature of the crime and the prolonged deceit, delivered a stern sentence. Daniel and Meredith, burdened by the manor's dark legacy, opted to sell the property, bidding farewell after a poignant memorial for Elinor in the restored garden. The subsequent owners removed the intercom system during renovations, their workers recounting eerie static and whispers that accompanied the dismantling, attributed to electrical interference. Before the Blackwood case file was archived, Detective Reeves revisited it one final time. Securing the manila folder, she pondered how the house itself had transcended time to unveil its hidden truth. The wheels of justice had turned, ensnaring Vincent Blackwood, all thanks to Elinor's resolute voice breaking through the veil of decades. Among local law enforcement, the case earned the moniker, "The House That Echoed Back." Occasionally, Detective Reeves would pass by the manor on her homeward journey. Though she never halted, she slowed down, a hint of nostalgia tugging at her as she rolled down the window, attuned to whispers carried on the gentle breeze, a poignant reminder of the enigmatic tale that unfolded within the walls of the manor. Story 22, nestled within the suburban property that the Mercer family now called home, there existed a secret unknown to them. The history of the house whispered through its creaking floors and faded siding, hinting at something more sinister lurking beneath the surface. One chilly evening, as the winter darkness descended early, the Mercers unraveled a mystery that would forever alter their perception of safety and privacy. Upon removing the worn carpet in their living room, a concealed door revealed itself, adorned with a heavy, rusted handle that resisted their efforts to open it. With a collective effort, the door yielded, releasing a rush of stale air heavy with the scent of damp earth. Descending the steps into the darkness below, the family anticipated a storage space, but encountered something far more unsettling. In the dim glow of a swaying light bulb, a single chair stood in the center of the small basement, casting eerie shadows across the walls adorned with a chilling display photographs of themselves. Images captured from within the confines of their own home, documenting moments they believed to be private and intimate. Detective Sarah Connors, accompanied by her partner, arrived at the scene to find the basement already a crime scene, marked off by fluttering yellow tape. Mrs. Mercer's trembling voice had alerted them to the disturbing discovery, prompting a meticulous documentation of the surreal space before further exploration. The forensic team's flashes of light illuminated the concrete walls and the bolted chair, while the row of chronological photographs painted a haunting picture of invasion and surveillance. Despite thorough investigation, no signs of forced entry or stolen items were found, only a pervasive violation of the family's privacy. Delving into the history of the property, Connors uncovered a web of deceit and manipulation spanning years. Each previous owner had unknowingly played a role in a twisted game orchestrated by a man named Edward Kelvin, the house's original builder who had vanished from public records. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Kelvin's obsession with the families who inhabited the house transcended mere curiosity. Hidden cameras, secret passages, and meticulous journals revealed a level of intrusion that shattered the Mercer family's sense of security. Kelvin's delusions painted the families as characters in his personal drama, mere pawns in his voyeuristic game. The revelation of his physical presence within the house sent shivers down the spines of those who had once called it home, prompting a swift retreat from the property they had unwittingly shared with a ghostly presence. Kelvin's trial exposed the extent of his surveillance network, unveiling a house designed not just for living, but for constant observation. The families, now scattered and haunted by the violation of their privacy, grappled with the realization that their most intimate moments had been captured and catalogued by a man who believed himself the rightful guardian of their lives. As the demolished ruins of the house faded into memory, the families carried with them the unsettling knowledge that the walls they had trusted to protect them had harbored a silent witness, a phantom observer who had woven himself into the very fabric of their existence. The lingering question of whether they were ever truly alone echoed in their minds, a chilling reminder of the thin veil between safety and surveillance that had been torn asunder by a man lost to his own illusions. Story 23. The Story of the Whispering Walls. The new occupants, Michael and Sarah Klein, believed it was just the peeling wallpaper, a simple renovation project to make their new Victorian-era home feel truly theirs. But as they gingerly removed the layers of time, a hidden narrative began to unfurl before their eyes. Beneath the worn floral patterns and aged stripes, a name emerged. Eleanor Winters scrawled repeatedly in ink, the letters etched with a sense of urgency that sent shivers down their spines. It was a name unknown to them, absent from any historical records or ownership documents of the house. Intrigued and slightly unnerved, they turned to the vast depths of the internet for answers. And there, in the digital labyrinth, they stumbled upon a single thread connecting the present to a past lost in shadows, a missing persons case from decades past. The photograph of the vanished woman bore an uncanny resemblance to Margaret Cavendish, the enigmatic woman who had passed on the keys to the house with an air of quiet mystery. A chill crept into the air, casting a veil of uncertainty over the once charming abode. Michael and Sarah, initially drawn to the house's old-world charm and intricate details, now found themselves entangled in a web of secrets and unanswered questions. The walls, once silent witnesses to bygone eras, now whispered tales of sorrow and mystery. As they delved deeper into the enigma of leaner winters, their peaceful nights turned into restless vigils, fueled by a relentless need to unravel the truth buried within the confines of their home. The discovery of a hidden space beneath the bedroom closet floorboards only deepened the mystery. A collection of identification cards bearing different names but the same haunting face an eerie mosaic of identities woven together by threads of deception and desperation. And then the truth unraveled like a tapestry of shadows cast by the flickering candlelight. DNA analysis, fingerprints, and long-buried secrets intertwined to reveal a chilling reality, a tale of fractured minds and stolen identities. Rebecca Eldridge, a name whispered in the hushed corridors of the past, emerged as the elusive key to the mystery. A psychiatric patient with a shattered sense of self, she had woven a complex tapestry of personas, each one a fragment of a fractured whole. The walls, adorned with the haunting repetition of Alina's name, became a canvas for Rebecca's inner turmoil, a desperate plea for recognition amidst the chaos of her splintered psyche. As the investigation unfolded, truths long buried beneath layers of deceit rose to the surface. The garden, once a sanctuary of blooming flowers, now bore the weight of a grim revelation, a somber reminder of a life lost and a soul adrift in the shadows. And in a moment of eerie clarity, the whispers of the walls gave way to a chilling confession. Alina's remains, unearthed from the depths of the earth, bore silent witness to a tragedy long forgotten but never truly laid to rest. For Michael and Sarah, the echoes of the past lingered in the air, casting a pall over their once idyllic home. The house, once a haven of dreams and aspirations, now stood as a monument to a dark chapter in history, a footnote in the annals of true crime, forever etched in the whispers of the walls. Story 24. The river flowed lazily on that quiet morning, its surface smooth as glass, undisturbed by even the gentlest of ripples. The fisherman, with his weathered hands and tired eyes, almost missed the sight of a lone suitcase bobbing near the shore. At first glance, it seemed like a mere discard, perhaps old clothes cast aside without care. But as he drew nearer, a pungent odor filled the air, thick, suffocating, impossible to ignore. The suitcase was bound in chains, its corners tarnished by exposure to the elements. When the authorities pried it open, it wasn't garments they found inside, it was hair, fingers frozen in a macabre grip, and at the bottom a chilling note that simply read, "This isn't the first." Detective Sarah Mercer arrived at the scene, a delicate handkerchief pressed to her nose to ward off the putrid scent that hung heavily in the air. The victim, a woman in her mid-30s named Catherine Walsh, lay before her, her once dark hair now matted and her skin pallid from the water's embrace. The medical examiner worked meticulously, documenting every detail with precision before the body was taken away for further examination. But what struck Mercer most profoundly was not the cruel disposal of the victim, but the eerie care taken in her presentation: manicured nails, freshly styled hair, dressed in luxurious attire. "She wasn't discarded here," Mercer murmured, her gaze fixed on the murky waters lapping at the shore. "She was arranged, showcased." Catherine Walsh, a successful real estate agent renowned for her dealings in high-end properties, lived a solitary life in an affluent neighborhood, divorced and childless. Colleagues painted a picture of a woman driven by ambition, meticulous in her work, and fiercely private. Her disappearance had been noted when she failed to show up for a crucial appointment with wealthy clients, a deal that promised to be her most substantial commission yet. She would never miss that showing, her assistant insisted, her voice tinged with worry. That sale meant everything to her. As investigators delved into Walsh's meticulously kept modern home, they found a world of pristine order, designer furniture arranged flawlessly, surfaces devoid of any dust. Even the refrigerator held neatly arranged meals in labeled containers, organized by day. However, a sense of disarray crept in when they stumbled upon a slightly ajar drawer in her home office. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its final entry sending shivers down their spines. He's watching again. The same car, different plates. A digital trail uncovered in Walsh's email unveiled a series of messages from unknown senders, all bearing the ominous phrase, "I see your perfection," each message arriving at precisely the same time on various days. Her internet history revealed searches for home security systems and self-defense tools, hinting at a growing sense of unease. Mercer pieced together the puzzle, linking the cryptic messages and the meticulous presentation of the victim to a chilling conclusion. "Our perpetrator is methodical," she confided to her partner. "This was no crime of passion, it was a ritual." A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source, a local pawnshop owner who recognized Walsh's distinctive emerald necklace among his wares, absent from her belongings. The culprit was identified as Michael Linden, a nondescript maintenance worker with a penchant for blending into the background. Surveillance footage depicted Linden making repeated visits to Walsh's building, sometimes pushing his maintenance cart, other times slipping in unnoticed. All visits coincided with her absence during property showings. Upon searching Linden's unassuming apartment, detectives unearthed a chilling collection of photographs, images of Walsh and other women, all sharing a striking resemblance, all captured without their knowledge. Some photos were defaced with red marks. Walsh was not the only victim. Behind a false panel in his closet lay a shrine. Each item meticulously placed: a hairbrush with strands of hair, used tissue stained with lipstick, keys, receipts, all accompanied by detailed notes on routines and preferences. The interrogation room turned icy as Linden sat, his demeanor eerily composed. Despite the mounting evidence against him, he remained stoic. "They were flawed," he uttered at last, his voice devoid of emotion. "They projected perfection, but I saw beyond it. Catherine's desk was always in disarray. She missed a spot when applying her lipstick. Her perfection was a faux pas." The search for the two other victims mentioned in Linden's note led detectives to remote locations where two more suitcases were recovered, each holding a woman akin to Walsh in appearance, real estate agents who prided themselves on their meticulous nature. During the trial, Linden sat unmoving, his gaze vacant as the prosecution laid bare his meticulous methods. Months of stalking, studying, and ultimately correcting what he perceived as imperfections in his victims before extinguishing their lives. As the judge sentenced Linden to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, the families of the victims sat in solemn silence, their eyes filled with a mix of grief and disbelief. For Detective Mercer, the case was officially closed, but the shadows of unanswered questions lingered. What twisted trigger had fueled Lyndon's fixation on these specific women? What inner flaw was he attempting to erase by enacting his gruesome rituals? The river meandered on, its waters eventually cleansing themselves of the darkness that had briefly tainted their surface. Yet in the quiet confines of the precinct, on Mercer's desk, lay copies of those haunting notebooks, a stark reminder that beneath the veneer of normalcy, beneath the facade of perfection, lurked a darkness that could surface unexpectedly. Sometimes the most perilous predators were those who moved among us unseen, biding their time, waiting for a single flaw to expose itself. Story 25. Renovations always have a way of revealing hidden mysteries, dusty old relics, forgotten treasures, echoes of the past. But when Sarah and Michael decided to uplift the floorboards in their new Victorian-era home, they stumbled upon a folded letter nestled beneath the wood, as if waiting to be discovered. The paper, aged and fragile, bore a cryptic warning: "Don't trust the one who knocked." Before they could process the message, a series of sharp knocks reverberated through the silent house, sending shivers down their spines. Sarah and Michael had been drawn to the charm of the old house, its intricate details whispering stories of bygone eras. Little did they know that their journey of restoration would unearth a darker tale. Detective Alina Reed, with her seasoned partner by her side, arrived at the scene to investigate. The floorboards lay open, revealing a hidden void beneath. With practiced hands, Alina retrieved the ominous note, already tainted by the couple's touch. As Sarah and Michael recounted the unsettling knocking sound, Alina studied their expressions, sensing genuine fear in their eyes. Background checks on the couple revealed nothing amiss, just a pair of newlyweds with stable lives. However, the house itself held a more intricate past. Once belonging to the Hargrove family, the property had stood vacant since the passing of the last resident, Margaret Hargrove, a solitary widow with no known enemies or suspicious circumstances surrounding her death. Forensic analysis dated the mysterious note back 2 decades, its faded script hinting at urgency and distress. Franklin and Margaret Hargrove, the former owners, seemed to have harbored secrets unknown to the outside world. Franklin, a respected teacher turned recluse, had a troubled past marked by paranoia and whispers of an unseen watcher. Margaret, haunted by fear of a relentless collector, had lived in the shadow of unknown threats. A breakthrough came when Alina uncovered Margaret's sister, now aged and frail, whose fragmented memories unveiled a chilling truth. The collector, Victor Mercer, a notorious loan shark from the past, had cast a dark shadow over the Hargroves' lives. Desperate to settle Franklin's gambling debts, Victor's arrival had sparked a tragic chain of events that led to his untimely demise. Further investigation, aided by Margaret's hidden diaries, uncovered a grim secret buried beneath the house, a skeleton, identified as Victor Mercer, concealed beneath the very foundation he once trespassed. The truth emerged from the shadows, painting a harrowing picture of fear, betrayal, and ultimate sacrifice. As the case concluded, justice was finally served, laying to rest the ghosts of the past. Sarah and Michael, unable to bear the weight of the house's history, chose to part ways with the property, leaving it abandoned and silent. Whispers of spectral knocks in the dead of night lingered in the air, a haunting reminder of the secrets that lay dormant within the walls. Detective Alina Reed's final report chronicled the enigmatic tale, highlighting the elusive nature of truth in a world fraught with unanswered questions. Some mysteries, she concluded, defy closure, forever echoing through the corridors of time, a reminder that darkness can lurk in even the most unsuspecting places. And so the note, with its ominous warning, remained a silent witness to a story that transcended generations, a riddle never fully unraveled. Story 26. In the quiet of the night, a faint sound echoed through the empty rooms of an abandoned house. It wasn't just any sound, it was a pocket dial, a mere collection of static and muffled noises. The operator almost dismissed it as a glitch until a voice broke through the chaos. A woman's voice, filled with urgency and fear, whispered, "He's here." He, and then an eerie silence enveloped the line. The mysterious call led Detective Morgan Reed to the desolate property, a place frozen in time, untouched for years. No traces of forced entry, no disturbances to be found. Yet in the dimly lit kitchen covered in layers of dust, a phone sat on the counter, its screen inexplicably glowing. The call had been placed just moments ago, a chilling realization that sent shivers down Morgan's spine. Replaying the recording for the fifth time, the whispered words lingered in the air, haunting her with their desperation and impossibility. This abandoned house had once belonged to the Sullivan family, who had left after a tragic fire devoured a part of their home. Since then, the house had remained uninhabited, visited only by a caretaker who swore no one had set foot inside for years. "Background check on the number," Morgan inquired, turning to her partner, Detective Walsh. The answer revealed that the number belonged to Catherine Sullivan, the daughter of the former residents, who had tragically passed away in a car accident 3 years prior. The pieces of the puzzle refused to align: a deceased woman's phone making calls from a deserted house, a conundrum that defied logic. The forensic team combed through the scene, finding nothing substantial to explain the eerie call. No fingerprints on the phone, no footprints around the property, no logical explanation for the inexplicable events. The only disturbance in the dust was beneath the phone, as if it had materialized there out of thin air. The heart of the investigation became those 11 seconds of static and breathing, intertwined with 5 haunting words. Voice analysis confirmed the voice to be Catherine's, with an unsettling 98% certainty, matching old recordings of her speaking. Strangely, the timestamp of the call coincided with the exact minute of Catherine's tragic demise 3 years earlier. Interviews with those who knew Catherine shed little light on the mystery. Her father, now remarried, appeared genuinely perplexed. Her mother, living in solitude, recognized her daughter's voice with a mix of sorrow and dread. And Mark Jennings, Catherine's former boyfriend, who had a solid alibi for the night of the call, denied any involvement. The case took a chilling turn when Catherine's mother unearthed a journal from her daughter's belongings. The journal chronicled a relationship that started with love but spiraled into control, isolation, and fear. The final entry hinted at impending danger, a stark warning that sent chills down Morgan's spine. Confronted with the damning evidence from the journal, Mark's facade crumbled under the weight of suspicion. Despite his protests of innocence, the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. A re-examination of the accident scene yielded a crucial discovery: Catherine's actual phone buried near the crash site, revealing the truth behind her tragic end. The buried phone held deleted texts that painted a harrowing picture of Catherine's final moments, stalked and terrorized by the one person she should have trusted. The evidence mounted against Mark, exposing his sinister manipulations and calculated deception. As the investigation delved deeper, a pattern of suspicious deaths emerged, all linked to Mark and his twisted games of control and violence. The truth unraveled like a sinister thread, weaving a tapestry of darkness and deceit. When the officers finally cornered Mark at the abandoned house, his eyes held a glint of madness as he confessed his twisted motives. His deluded belief that a ghostly call could exonerate him, a macabre game to taunt the living from beyond the grave. The trial that followed was swift, the jury unanimous in their verdict of guilt. As justice was served, Catherine's mother clutched the journal close to her heart, a bittersweet solace in the face of tragedy. The phone from the abandoned house now rests in the evidence locker, a silent witness to the horrors that unfolded within its walls. And though its battery has long been removed, whispers abound among the officers of phantom rings that echo in the stillness of the night. Catherine's story lives on, not as a ghostly tale, but as a testament to the resilience of the voiceless, a reminder that even in death, the truth will find its way to the light. And as the stars twinkle in the velvet sky, a sense of closure descends upon the haunted house, its secrets laid bare in the gentle embrace of night. Story 27. In the quiet of the night, a faint flicker danced across the baby monitor screen, a subtle disturbance in the digital realm. At first, the mother brushed it off as mere interference, a glitch in the technology that often plagued modern devices. But then the silence was shattered by crackling static, and a voice, soft and chilling, whispered through the darkness, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A shiver ran down the mother's spine as her blood turned cold. With a racing heart, she hurried to her son's room, each step echoing in the silent house. As she pushed open the door, her worst fears were realized. The crib stood empty, a void where her precious child should have been nestled in slumber. The window remained shut, the door securely locked. The only anomaly was the stuffed rabbit lying on the floor, its unblinking black eyes fixed on her with an unsettling gaze. In a frenzy of panic and despair, the mother's screams pierced the night, a raw expression of terror and anguish that summoned the help of concerned neighbors. Emergency services descended upon the scene, finding her cradling the silent rabbit, lost in a world of disbelief and heartache. Samuel, her 4-month-old infant, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void that no words could fill. The investigation that followed was a labyrinth of mysteries and suspicions. How could someone infiltrate a fortified home, snatch a child from his crib, and vanish into the night without a single trace, save for a haunting voice on a baby monitor? All eyes turned to the grieving mother, Rebecca, her every move scrutinized under the harsh light of suspicion. But then a glimmer of hope emerged amid the darkness. Forensic experts uncovered minuscule fibers on the nursery windowsill, fibers that whispered of a clandestine entry and a calculated escape. The focus shifted, revealing a shadowy figure lurking in the periphery of surveillance footage, a figure cloaked in secrecy and malice. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, a new suspect emerged from the shadows: Daniel, the absent husband whose return cast a pall of uncertainty over the fractured family. His hands bore the telltale marks of a climber, his alibis crumbling under the weight of hidden truths and buried deceptions. The truth, when it finally emerged, was a tapestry of betrayal and longing. The baby monitor, once a beacon of comfort, now stood as a silent witness to treachery and deceit. Through digital sorcery, a voice had been crafted, a phantom whisper that had led to a mother's despair and a child's abduction. In a basement hidden from prying eyes, Samuel was discovered in the care of a woman named Elaine, a ghost from Daniel's past with a heart consumed by loss and vengeance. The threads of fate intertwined, revealing a web of lies and schemes that sought to rewrite the course of lives torn asunder. In a courtroom hushed with anticipation, the truth unfolded in echoes of sound and silence. The baby monitor's recording, enhanced and dissected, revealed not only the chilling voice that had haunted Rebecca, but also a familiar cough, a damning echo of guilt that sealed the fates of the conspirators. Justice, though delayed, found its mark. Daniel and Elaine faced the consequences of their actions, their fates sealed by a jury's swift judgment. Rebecca, scarred but resilient, sought solace in a new beginning, a fresh start far from the shadows of the past. And so, as the night surrendered to the gentle embrace of dawn, a mother and child embarked on a journey of healing and redemption, leaving behind the ghosts of a nightmarish ordeal. The stuffed rabbit, a silent sentinel of a bygone tragedy, remained locked away, a reminder of the darkness that once lurked in the corners of their lives. But through it all, a flicker of hope endured, a beacon of light guiding them towards a future untainted by the shadows of the past.